Good morning. I wanted to welcome everybody to the March 20th, 2025 meeting of the Seattle Design Commission. We hold these meetings on MS Teams as well and make the recording of the meeting available on our website. Today, we'll be starting out from 9 and 10 till 10:30, concluding our initial review of the Westlake Park project. At our March 6th meeting, we had a presentation and commission questions. We weren't able to complete the deliberation and action portion of the meeting. And so that will be the focus today, although I understand there might be just a few slides from the team to answer some of the broader questions that the commission has posed. From 10:30 until noon, we'll be reviewing the public benefit proposal for a alley vacation in the Greenwood neighborhood at 87th and Palatine. And then finally, from 1 until 3, we'll be having a roundtable with city staff on our reviews of the West Seattle Light Rail extension reviews. There will not be an MS Teams component to that portion of the meeting. We have the Westlake Park team here this morning. Welcome. Why don't we start with introductions with commissioners in the room, and we have one commissioner who's attending online, Kevin O'Neill. So we'll go ahead and start in the room with Kate, and then have Kevin introduce, and then we'll have the presenters.
Hi. Hi, I'm Kate. I'm the art commissioner.
Morning, Brian Markham, Engineering Commissioner.
Morning, Zubin Rao, Architecture Commissioner.
Hi, my name is Kate Moore, and I'm the Engage Commissioner. I'm Molly Katalnik, and I'm the Urban Design Commissioner.
Ray Gastel, Planning Commissioner.
Janine Zuni at large.
Baby Boger, landscape.
Kevin, could you introduce yourself?
Good morning, Kevin O'Neill, Transportation and Planning Commissioner. Sorry that I can't be there in person. Thanks.
Do you want to kick off introductions for us?
Sure. Yes. My name's Andrew McConico. I'm the design manager for Seattle Parks and Recreation.
And Andy Mitten, Berger Partnership Landscape Architects. I'm a principal.
I'm Ben Hansiak, Project Manager with the Parks Department.
I'm Beth Purcell. I'm managing the project with Seattle Parks Foundation.
And my name is Paulina Arango, and I'm a designer at Berger Partnership.
You had a number, there were some slides that you wanted to present. After our last meeting, we talked, just for the purpose of today's meeting, we did have an opportunity to download. And we thought it would be helpful to have just a few slides to maybe answer some of the more immediate questions that the commission posed at the previous meeting before we just dive right into deliberation. And Caitlin will be leading that for us. Thanks, Caitlin. Go ahead, you can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay.
Oh, which you
I did, yeah.
Right
Right after introductions.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah.
I can give a little introduction from the city department perspective. So yeah, again, my name is Andrew McConico. I'm a licensed landscape architect and Seattle Parks design manager. I work with our team of in-house landscape architects and architects to deliver high quality public spaces and really kind of enhance the quality of life for Seattle residents and visitors. So Andy will cover most of this, but yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge Westlake Park is a really small urban park. It's about 0.45 acres, has kind of a unique triangular wedge shape that has some constraints around it, but it holds a lot of meaning for Seattle residents. It's kind of a place where we come together to celebrate, to protest, and just eat lunch outside often. So acknowledging that, the park also has some real significant maintenance and infrastructure issues. A lot of those really have not been addressed or seen a lot of improvement since the park was constructed in 1988. So though beautiful when it is infrequently running, the fountain is no longer functional, and the pumps and equipments are failing. And that is resulting in kind of drainage and other infrastructure issues to the property and surrounding area. Retrofitting the fountain would trigger some really significant and complicated health and code requirements. This would require adding a restroom within 100 feet of the fountain, which is not feasible in kind of the scope of work we're looking at today. The in-park electrical equipment is also very old and outdated. I bet people have kind of noticed there are various junction boxes kind of popping up out of tree planters and in other areas. And so that's really a safety and security concern. And by being able to update those, it'll allow kind of additional lighting in the park. And then the grove of Zelkova trees are playing a really important part in this space to make it comfortable. But they are currently unirrigated and have, or have some soil volume issues. And it's kind of amazing that they are functioning as well as they are. And then kind of relative to the FIFA World Cup, there are some questions about this design and the intent of how it aligns with the FIFA World Cup. So the FIFA local organizing committee identified Westlake Park due to its function as a front porch for those entering the city via transit as an important public space during FIFA. And they partnered with Seattle Parks Foundation to kind of provide these early resources, which allowed the foundation to kind of do these initial community engagement sessions and kind of help set this a longer, some of a broader vision that is outside of this kind of original scope around what could happen there. But since that time, Seattle Center has been identified as the main gathering place for watch parties and major gatherings. That makes sense for a lot of reasons and kind of their ability to program that space and handle all the large crowds. And so watch parties are not permitted at Westlake until all the games in Seattle have concluded. There will be some kind of ticketed, no-fee fan fest events at Westlake. So with that, I would kind of say, yeah, these, the improvements that we're looking at Westlake are really kind of about safety and security. We're appreciative of the Seattle Parks partnership to be able to do this work. Doing these kind of public-private partnerships are really important at like a larger scale in the city and throughout the country to deliver great park spaces. And so, yeah, we appreciate all the work. And with that, I'll hand it over to Andy.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Andrew. And we just kind of, with the help of Michael, put an agenda together here that we're going to organize some of our comments as responding to questions that had come up during the Q&A. And we also wanted to share some updates because, as we had mentioned when we met with you a couple of weeks ago, we will be submitting our design development drawings tomorrow. So we do have some design evolution that we wanted to share. But Andrew focused quite a bit on project scope and program. I will highlight a few things as I go through the slides. We will touch on elements of design response to site conditions and constraints, including opportunities, as well as we've gotten a lot of feedback in the past 3 weeks from the public and stakeholders that we wanted to bring up to your attention to provide some clarity on equity in public space and programming, which are important, and then a few more details on materiality as we've been diving in. First, just wanted to remind everybody that our project goals for this, first and foremost, we really want to improve the guest experience, something that begins to foster human connections and provides a little bit more permanency in the park than what is there today. A lot of what is there is brought in and activated during the day and taken away at night. Create a more cohesive park space and experience, trying to unify all the spaces, especially as we're mindful of other planning projects that are happening with Sound Transit and with Westlake Center to the north of us. address safety needs, which goes hand in hand with the next one, which is aging infrastructure. And just to remind, right now, the park does not have permanent lighting. That is a major component of this project, is to bring the electrical infrastructure above ground because it has failed. And then when in doing so, we've also looked at identifying new facilities to help support park programming for families and neighborhood. The neighborhood where that really has come in is conversations about restrooms, which one question that I think is very important, you had asked in the Q&A, how big is Westlake Park in terms of square footage? And the park property itself is 20,000 square feet, which is not a very big piece of real estate. It's the equivalent of Pioneer Place Park down in Pioneer Square. When you add the sidewalk areas that include the right-of-way, it goes up to 37,000 square feet. But the park does not have full control over all of that right-of-way space. It needs to be there to function for moving people through the space and for the bus stop that's on 4th and other activities that happen in and around the site. And we want to set the stage for longer term adjacent improvements. A lot of what we're doing is very mindful of what Sound Transit is doing, as well as development to the north. This park has always had to flex and work with what is happening in those adjacent spaces. So it's been a focus of ours to make sure that what we're doing is compatible with those future developments. Knowing that those are long-term, as Andrew was mentioning, this is really setting the stage to address some things that are failing, and there is an immediate need to get something done, especially with electrical. So this is an updated site plan. You'll notice now that we have more clarity in terms of the elements, including you can now see the Coast Salish basket weave pattern. There were questions about, does that pattern extend through the right-of-way? You can see up to the north. This is Pine Street. To the left of the page, 4th Avenue is at the bottom of the screen. And it does continue here, as well as the sidewalk across the street and into Westlake Center that's off to the north. Most of our improvements for this project are going to focus north of this corner down here, which is the Seven Hills art installation. That will remain. No changes are occurring other than, as Andrew mentioned, a priority goal of the project is to improve the health and condition of the trees. We will be removing pavement to give the trees more room to grow, increase air water exchange, and try to improve their overall health. The next slide I'm going to go to is actually going to focus in on what is the core of our project area. And in terms of our design response to site conditions, constraints, and opportunities, as you all know, the water wall is down here. It's being replaced. Change from what you saw last time, you actually can see the footprint of the fountain. It's now identified as a series of shrubs that are different from some lower plantings that are around it, with some addition of trees, which we'll look at in some renderings here. A big part of this project is to rehabilitate the Coast Salish basket weave pattern. That is going to remain. That is an important piece of this park. It has been since the day it opened, and it's a very cherished element to the community. We have also responded to the bus stop along 4th Avenue, and some of our recent meetings with King County Metro and Sound Transit, we understand that bus service along 4th Avenue is not long-term. In about 10 years, that bus stop is planned to be removed. So there is no need for a permanent bus shelter here. But we are looking at ways to still accommodate people to pull off the side of the roadway. And these dashed lines you see here is some of the new design iteration thinking with LMN on some park shelters. They would not be designed as bus shelters to provide some coverage from sun or inclement weather in the park, And it would actually be two separate shelters that would allow some of the vegetation to grow through the roof, which would actually soften this a little bit, make it feel more park-like. We also, as part of this, are looking to preserve the opportunity for water features in the future. We are going to cap those utilities, and if funding came available and there was a need and something that would support an adjacent project that could provide restrooms, that could be brought back to the park in the future. In terms of design response to equity in public space and programming, from a lot of what we heard through some of our stakeholder meetings was that the playground in the previous design had become too large for the space. And after we started doing some comparisons and looked at the size of the parcel, we tended to agree. And so the play area has now been reduced and it is slightly larger than the temporary playground that is out there today. The project still would like to make this permanent and increase the amount of play elements and activities for a growing downtown community that we know is continuing to evolve in this space. We also would like to increase multi-generational seating, which in community response, we learned that a lot of people do hang out in the tree grove. They like the movable furniture, the Adirondack chairs, the opportunity to meet with individuals, have lunch there, read a book. That has now been preserved as part of this design. And we've woven some planters and benches along the edge to sort of create a little bit more of a separation between the street and the park, which is currently being done with temporary barriers, which don't add a lot of softening. That was another core thing we heard from the community, was to bring more planting and landscaping into the site. We also responded by listening to the skateboard community, and you'll notice this element here where my cursor is. That is an existing granite curb that is part of the fountain construct. That was a critical piece that was identified as one of the key features they like to skate in the park that has now been preserved. Some initial ideas for materials, plants, lighting, and artwork. As I mentioned, we are keeping the Coast Salish basket weave. We are also looking to salvage a large portion of the granite that is in the arch and the stage, and all of the carved relief feature elements are preserved. These two blocks here that are just south of Pine Street are actually a 4x4x4 solid chunk of granite that has the carved veneer on it that now sets the backbone of a stage that is now accessible. That square in front of those would actually be a spot where somebody could come for free speech, state their mind, because there was a lot of concern over the removal of the stage. And that will always be a core part of Westlake, is being able to express free speech. The park is also looking to, or the project's team is also looking to make sure that materials blend well with the environment. They would complement the granite colors. We all know that the soft pink and the grays are sometimes hard to match, which is why for benches, we're looking at a lot of wood, metal components that are gray that would really complement the site. And for the plantings, we are looking at a mix of native and adaptive plants to really, again, bring in some of those references to the Coast Salish traditions of the site. You'll see in a moment here in some renderings, we've also considered a holiday tree that is living. The lighting, while not fully represented here, we do have more details on that now. We have a lot of very good lighting along 4th and Pine, but we will be augmenting that to make sure that the tree grove has adequate lighting, feels safe and comfortable, and is a place that you want to be at the end of the day. We also are looking with lighting opportunities with lighting to include color changing. So DSA, when they do their holiday events, wouldn't have to put out as much infrastructure, where you could program the lights different colors, different times of the year. We're looking at fixtures that could project onto the ground So you could have different patterns, different times of the year. Convenience outlets would all be located high as well. And we have considered artwork spaces, including a spot for a mural on the building here right by Sephora, just near the alley. There's a blank wall there, as well as other opportunities to engage with artists. And the hope is with putting 3 different power pedestals to the north, west, and south, temporary art installations, including anything that could have to do with lighting, could be better supported, along with being able to support food trucks and other activities and events that DSA does in the park on a daily basis. So these are some updated renderings that show what that design is looking like. One of those opportunities for some of the salvaged carved granite is along this wall where we're getting a little bit of a berm for the landscaping. You can also see along 4th Avenue, there's a nice definition of edge, and it's very porous too, which will really help with sort of making it feel comfortable and inviting in the park, and actually ends up being a unifying element through the site. This is a view looking south into the park. You can see the granite elements here in this planting. One of the things that the planting here does is it actually provides a nice demarcation for where the alley is that we need to keep open, the alley egress. And we've provided a larger planting area here under the Zelkovas to help with their success and longevity. And it actually helps frame the park a little bit more, gets a little bit more of a park-like setting. And you can see off in the distance an opportunity for an evergreen tree, which could be used as a holiday tree. And then this is from near the playground, which is more or less where the temporary playground is located today. Again, about the same size as what's there, slightly larger, allows a little bit more flexibility, more use for play elements. We feel it is right sized for the park. And the park here is programmed much as it is today with food truck and the movables, tables and chairs looking to the north at some of the future changes that we know will happen to the right, Sound Transit, and to the north with the monorail and Westlake Center project. So that, I turn it back to you, Michael.
Andy. Caitlin, and commissioners, before we pick up with deliberation and any potential action today, I just wanted to make sure that if there are people from the public who are attending, that they have an opportunity for up to 2 minutes of public comment. Looks mostly like city people who are attending online. So I just wanted to say that right now, if there are people who are attending that do want to make public comment, if you could quickly do the hand raising function on MS Teams. Otherwise, what we'll do is turn it over to Caitlin to lead the deliberation and then action today, which we have until 10:30. I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand. So Caitlin, you want to take us through it?
Yep. Okay. We'll now move into deliberation. There are 5 areas we will focus on to guide our conversation. The first will be project scope and program. Second is design response to site conditions, constraints, and opportunities. The third is design response to equity in public space and programming. Fourth is initial ideas for employing materials, plants, lighting, and artwork. And then the fifth is post-LIPA vision. If your comment does not fit under one of these areas, we can save it until the end. And as a reminder, we will be taking hands during our deliberation. So starting with the first one, project scope and program. This could focus on defining the park scope, its relationship with transit, leveraging Bike and Pine Renaissance investment, and ensuring utilities are in place to support flexible programming.
I have a quick question. Is there an opportunity to ask project teams questions
Just a
as
brief
part of it?
Just
Yeah, just
briefly, yeah.
Great. I'll hold it for when it's based on the,
Well, and I think too, what we've been trying to do, just so you know, what we try to do as well in, when we finish deliberation is to just circle back with the project team. Did we raise an unanswered question? Did you have any questions about what happened or anything like that? So.
I do actually have one quick question.
Yeah.
Could you just, with your cursor, outline where the current stage is? Because now we see the,
It's roughly right. You see my cursor? Yeah, there it is. It's roughly right in here. Kind of hard to see.
And those dash triangles were the old,
Those are the proposed new park shelters that are,
oh, the,
yeah, that are very conceptual still and are not ready for,
And are not funded.
yeah.
correct.
okay.
I understand that. Is the play area in this phase one?
It all depends on our cost estimates that we get from our general contractor and whether or not we can afford to do that. So.
Is that the first thing that's sort of on the edge or?
Priority wise, the priorities are to address the infrastructure and lighting and paving restoration.
Yeah.
And we will need to look at what the priorities are. I think the play area is one, but the landscaping and site furnishings are up there as well. So really budget dependent.
Mhm.
So Caitlin, I also have a question pertaining to this area, if that's okay.
Sure.
So I apologize. I missed the briefing on March 6th, so you may have covered this, but Andrew, you mentioned that you'd been coordinating with Sound Transit and King County Metro to look at longer term transit changes, which is great. This has traditionally been really identified as kind of a multimodal transit hub in this general area, you know, with monorail and light rail and bus and the streetcar, essentially. So have you, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but have you also sat down and coordinated with SDOT to talk about those elements, and are they kind of comfortable with where the design is at this point?
Yeah, SDOT is definitely a partner on the project, so we are looking at the right of way, especially with them. And we have had conversations with Sound Transit and King County Metro. Sound Transit at this point, you know, their project is not as far along as this one, but it does not appear at this time that they will have direct access to the park from their future development. So they will be fronting, I think, Pine Street and Fifth. So again, they're not as far along, so we're aware of what's going on and been trying to factor it into the project and definitely working closely with SDOT.
Great, thank you very much.
Kevin normally chairs our chair, but we pressed Molly in the service today because wasn't able to join us in person.
You guys done test bits for a stage scenario, a food truck scenario, like the things that you know that you want this to work with?
We have, and we did present those. I do have them if we want to go back to them, but we have tested that the food trucks can circulate and they do fit. And stages, again, the stages are more for anywhere from a gathering of 100 people up to maybe 1,000, give or take. There are, you know, if you do a much larger stage configuration, it would require closing Pine, could even require closing both Pine and Fourth, and that can still be accommodated much as it is today.
I just,
Dive in.
I just want to make sure, so the alternative to the existing stage from a free speech perspective, it's the piece adjacent to the vegetation on the west.
To the north, right here.
And
You
what
see
and
my
what is
cursor
it?
Northeast, or-
Page left. Just a big
Page
rock
left, yeah.
that you can stand on.
Yeah, north is to the left. It fits better on the screen that way.
So just to be clear, the role, the opportunity will still exist. It's being moved slightly and its
Right.
configuration being more ADA compliant than the current.
Correct.
Well, the current is ADA.
And it's not safe either. There's safety issues with the way it's designed.
And is the new one ADA compliant?
It's flush. You can
It's a
roll.
Flush stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's, I keep thinking of it more as a podium,
Mhm.
because really the way the current stage functions, if you're actually up there, it's more of a podium. It's a very small footprint when you're actually on the top of the current stage. And so what we're trying to do is make something that's accessible to everyone and still designated, flanked with the two granite pieces with the motifs and special paving. So it still functions in that way, but makes it available for anyone that wants to use that.
What's the height of the podium?
No,
It's flush.
It's
It's
completely flush.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's just that grade.
It's that
Mhm.
great.
it's just a different paper.
It's just delineated
Different
by
paper.
from plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's flanked by the columns, so it will feel special. But it's available to anyone.
okay, and the columns are vertical.
They're 4x4 granite pieces with the motif.
Okay,
that's existing.
salvaged
Yeah,
and moved.
Yep.
Then, okay.
yeah.
And the planter so that's a planter behind it?
It's a flush in-ground planting area.
Okay, so the person as they're standing would be visible 360.
Yeah.
No.
Can see it
Except for
here.
these bushes.
These are the salvaged. You can see my cursor. These are the two salvaged pieces. We don't have a view that really shows it well from you can sort of see it in the background.
What about a person sitting in a wheelchair? Would they be visible 360 from the other side of the plantings?
It maybe not. It depends on what the plantings are. And I guess I would ask how important that might be, because that's not really how it is functioning now, because the existing stage has been altered. So you can't sit or climb up on the other side because there was a wall put in and plantings added to prevent people from interacting on that side of the stage.
So it currently is a one-sided
Yeah.
stage that faces, so you
The park.
directionally, oh, it is facing the park now,
Mhm.
one-sided. I see it, because it used to be towards Pike. Okay. I have one other question about the stage. Did you look into keeping the current location, but modifying the?
Yeah, so
Because of like current, because this will be kind of a comment later, but just was there exploration of current elements of the park and repurposing them?
we have explored that. Let me get back to the site plan really quick. So one of the things that we did in shifting it is right now, when DSA sets a stage up, they have to set up a temporary stage because the size of the one that's there is not large enough to accommodate most everything they do. It's also hard to get performers up there, especially if they're disabled. And it actually takes up quite a bit of space that they have that's usable for tables and chairs and seating. So one of the things we did is by offsetting where this is it allows them to set up a stage either here or down here, where they actually can get more people into the open space. And that is why we offset it, is to allow more flexibility and use in the area.
Also off of the footprint
Not
of
if
the
that's
tunnel.
romantic.
So.
Right.
In terms of responsiveness to Sound Transit, they don't want us putting elements on the tunnel. There's some right now that we're gonna have to move off. But that's the other piece, is that we're trying to keep those elements within the park. footprint.
The tunnel comes through about right where that yellow highlight is.
Sorry, Beth, do you need to move things from this plan to accommodate that, or this has moved things?
The current stage is over the tunnel.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And so you're being very careful to dismantle that and not put anything large above it.
But it's Sound Transit saying we can't have that above the tunnel. So if it were to remain, that's fine because it's existing.
We haven't
Okay.
had that conversation.
That planter by the now not stage is flush. The other planters are elevated.
These here, excuse me, are flush, but we've burned the soil up to help nestle the park down a little bit, give some topography and relief. So there are some walls here, but it is all in grade planting here. There are raised planters that set on the paving that serpentine and weave through the site going this way that include benches on the backside that are permanent. You can see them through there. So those are above ground, about 30 inches high. And they're also performing a double duty, which is we have been required to provide a defensible edge that is crash protected and rated. So that's the other reason why they are there.
There will likely be some of the feedback that the Parks Department internal design team gave is providing a little bit more of a buffer along that 4th Avenue edge. Because a lot of the times the traffic there feels very, there are buses and cars moving quickly. So, that has a kind of a benefit of giving the park a little bit more of enclosure as an urban space.
On the north side of the park along Pine has there been any further coordination with the Pike Pine Streetscape and Bicycle Improvements Project on that edge? Has there been any thinking about the behavior of the pavers in that location or about the planters on that side?
We will be meeting with SDOT here coming up to talk more through that. And that will need to be coordinated more as we learn about I don't know if the planters they're developing are crash rated or not. I don't think they are. So I think we're still going to be required to do what we need to do along the park edge. So I think there will end up being a double row of planters along here. And we'll coordinate with SDOT as needed.
Have you heard from Wausau about whether they can make the Westlake pattern?
We're still working with them on that.
Wausau are the manufacturers of the Westlake planters.
Okay.
I have a question about the playground area. Do you know how much it's being utilized as of right now? How much it's being used? Is it popular or not? I know you've done engagements with the community.
We just anecdotally from being on the site, it tends to get a lot more use in the summer. Not surprising, weather's nicer. There's also more tourists in town, lots of families visiting. I have seen it get used in the winter. I think though part of the reason why it doesn't get used very much is because there's not a lot there. And usually what we've heard is kids will play on it for about 5 minutes, they get bored and they move on.
I think I mentioned this before, but the downtown activation plan, which surveyed 700 or 800 people, called for a lot of the desire for free, fun family activity in downtown. And so part of our responsiveness is from that survey. We also did a survey and had interest in play area. And I know DSA does quarterly surveys in terms of people using it. So that supports the idea for it expanded, but again, it's much smaller than what we had originally shown.
I want to make sure we have plenty of time for deliberation. I think we do. I think we've got plenty of time. Why don't we just go obviously there's a lot of additional questions. Why don't we go until 9:45 with questions and then pivot to deliberation and action?
I have one quick question to follow up from yours. looking at the survey information that you shared from the last presentation, it looks like predominantly for, in replacement of the fountain, what folks were interested in was a new fountain as compared to a play area, which takes up small slice of the pie chart. So I'm wondering, did you consider investing this first phase of resources more into a new fountain as compared to a new playground?
2 points. One is I think because there's an existing playground there, that information is a little bit skewed, right? Because you're not going from a lack of a playground to a new playground. So I think people use the current playground. In terms of another sort of water feature, I probably should defer to Parks, but Parks has a hard time maintaining water elements all over, and especially downtown. I think there's only one functioning water feature in all of downtown. Prefontaine is looking at changes. So we were directed by Parks. Again, this is a Parks improvement project, not to do a water feature.
Yeah, I mean, I think that point, the scale of those investments are very different. And there's also the added element of having to provide a restroom facility within 100 feet if you have water that someone's interacting with. So if it's water that would take the place of kind of the play element, you'd have to have that restroom within 100 feet. So then that expands on the investment also. And just, and then, yeah, that's right. I mean, we do have a hard time maintaining these features downtown.
I do want to say that for a playground to not have a bathroom near it it may not be a rule, but every parent wants that. And that seems inconsistent. Honestly, right? Like,
I don't want to pick up
yeah,
the answer questions, but I know there's a lot of conversations about working with Sound Transit on that. I know that's further out, but public restrooms, those are conversations going on. Currently, CSA tells people to go to Brookfield Mall, to Westlake Mall to use the facilities there.
One last question. With your new proposed stage kind of replacement area, was that design developed from feedback or consultation from the activist communities that have spoken for desire for the space to hold that activity?
Right. Our goal has always to maintain this as an area of gathering and free speech and democracy, and having something designated was something that we heard from people that they were concerned about the stage, that ability to do that going away. So
But has
that's
this particular iteration?
No, you were seeing this, this is not out to the public yet.
A very simple question. The bollards in the northeast corner, those are retractable. The ones that are kind of in the right of way, I presume, of
These that are up here, those are removable. Yeah, retractable is difficult here, one, because of the tunnel, and two, because of cost.
Sure. But, so
the other order.
you need to remove them to bring in the food trucks.
I think the idea with those is, and the crash protection in general is, to protect the park during events. So I would imagine those are not going to be installed most of the time. That there's an easement for that alleyway that needs to be kept open. And that alley serves, the buildings that are adjacent to that alley. So it'd be something that would get brought in for special events.
That's a nice pause. Is there any other questions?
I had a couple of questions about the art program, but we can get to it when in the art section.
Okay, going back to deliberation. So the first area was project scope and program. Did anyone have specific comments in that area? Okay, Second
I
area.
do.
Oh.
Okay, so one of the things that you mentioned in this section, Caitlin, was the Pike Pine Renaissance investments. I'm seeing on the site plan that the planned bike lane alignment for Pike Pine Streetscape and bicycle improvements is not included. And so I would encourage coordination with SDOT and the Office of the Waterfront so that that's included, so that also if there are any, as you're considering these short-term investments and the potential for what does Westlake look like long-term, as conversations are happening, we're clear about how Pike Pine was a light touch through here, and if there's further visioning for this area in the future, I want to make sure that we're thinking about that light touch was not intended to be the forever of this location either. And so thinking about that section of Pike Pine Streetscape and bicycle improvements as related to the long-term vision for Westlake Park would be helpful. And just a start for that would be, let's see what it's going to be on the drawings, even just as you're coordinating with planner and that.
We don't have any information on anything that's happening north of Pine Street, so we can coordinate with SDOT, and we will definitely do that. That's a great point.
Great, yeah, that would come
For
from
sure.
SDOT.
If they have anything to add, yep.
Yeah, and there are.
Yeah, Molly, you were quicker on the, you were quicker on the draw than I was, but yeah, I just think with all the right of way, surrounding this site, and then all of the different modal elements that are happening here, I just, it's great that you're thinking about forward compatibility with transit and with Sound Transit. I just think that ongoing coordination with SDOT is really critical here. Just knowing that how that area functions today, and also how it's going to function in the future. So yeah, I think I'm comfortable with the fact that you are doing that outreach, but I think it's really critical to keep it moving as you go. Thanks.
So this section was also about the Sound Transit and monorail coordination. So on that front, I think encouraging the continued coordination with Sound Transit and surrounding tenants about restrooms would make sense as a recommendation. What do you all think? Great.
I concur. I mean, I think it's come up in our Sound Transit conversations, as everybody knows, and given again what's happening here. I mean, there are restrooms in Westlake Mall, but they're not really public, truly. So yeah, I think that is an important element to discuss moving forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I was going to say is that when there's a discussion of like this being a public-private partnership, like in essence, Westlake is like a public-private space, right? And so it would be amazing in the future for those, those stipulations of water feature needs bathroom, which makes sense. Playgrounds, so many playgrounds don't have bathrooms, and it's always desired, and it just can't, just doesn't happen. So this is this opportunity where like we have 80% vacancy. Can there be that public-private partnership in the future? And I think that really the city should move on that. So,
Even
and that's where you get the
storefronts
bathroom.
right along, even the storefronts right along the market.
Exactly. That's exactly.
Can I comment on that in deliberations?
It,
Yeah, I would say that Parks probably strongly supports that. It's a lot of pressure on the Parks Department to maintain the 180 bathrooms we have in the city. We're one of the few departments that provides public restrooms within the city. There's a really strong need in Seattle for more public restrooms. I'm sure everyone's aware of the Seattle Times articles about this. So yeah, any collaboration and coordination with other agencies and departments to help support public restrooms is appreciated strongly. And this has a very small footprint of a park site too, so.
Part of the questions we've had with SDOT in the past is if the restrooms are behind the paywall for riders. So that would be another discussion point for access for the park users.
I think I want to probably say it the other way. This is a very small park. I don't think burdening it with the restroom is the answer. And I challenge all of us to think about how we're asking this group to coordinate with everybody else to make sure that somebody else does bathrooms. I think that might be a not accomplishable task. I like the idea that we're having conversations about restrooms, but in my mind, this is not, it's not in this triangle, and it's really hard to ask these guys to do it.
But it's coming also out of response for public desire for the
Right,
fountain.
right.
Understood.
I think as they go, as what you see progresses beyond the instant issue, which is what are you doing for FIFA? That more expansive view that if playground equipment is at play, if a water future is being envisioned for future action, then that question gets teed up. I'm assuming that they would be reserving space for temporary restrooms for the more pressing issue around FIFA stuff. They'll figure that out. But I think you're right. If these other interventions are proceeded with, a more expansive play area and water feature, then yes, that question becomes unavoidable.
I think you're hitting exactly on my point, right? Like this, when we're designing a flexible park, right?
Yeah.
We should have test fit
Yeah.
ideas, like the fact that the stage and the element awning things are kind of programmed to be in the same area. To me, that's a miss, right? Like you can't say that you're planning a thing, but you're also, this is where you want your stage. But where would we put Porta Johns or whatever, right? Like we plan a flexible space and you sort of lay it out. This is a test fit. This works. Okay, now it's flexible. To me, saying 1 or 2 food trucks can park here, that's not a test fit. That's a size thing. I'd love to understand what winter market looks like, what an actual stage layout looks like. You know, test your park to fit the usages that we know are coming, and FIFA maybe as well, right? It seems like we clash with our own ideas here.
Any other on that first topic?
The thing that I've heard people talk about that is program would be the stage. Did anyone have any comments related to the stage?
It's not a stage.
Yeah, I was gonna put that on the fixed program.
Okay.
We can wait.
Yeah.
For temporary programming, or sorry, for park programming.
We can wait for that.
Okay.
Which section?
Which number 2?
Okay, great.
Okay, we're gonna move forward. The second one is design response to site conditions, constraints, and opportunities. This could address how the design impacts bus transit on Fourth Avenue, placement of fixed program elements, and rehabilitation of the Coast Salish basket weave paving, as well as its impact on tree health.
Okay, so I'll just start with one. I'm not gonna hit all the, I put this in that, but, so I guess the question, you know, I brought this up last time to to our, group, to the commission. The question of the state, so like starting with the stage, I'm really appreciative to see the stage back and the listening to feedback. I think that's really important. And there's already changes in this design from what we saw 2 weeks ago. So I think appreciate the nod to that. My big question, and when I asked to like look at the, you know, where the existing stage is, it's a slightly different location, but in essence, I feel that this is kind of fixed elements and stage altogether. I feel that the elements that are proposed for the park now and the improvements are in very similar positions to, and we even see the palimpsest of the previous fountain that is to be demolished and become shrubs as a differentiation, is very similar locations. So spatially, I don't think that the park has changed that much, which one could say is good. But then at the same time, I question removing those elements and getting to that thing of like, why take away the current stage? Get it that it doesn't work, but is there a way to kind of salvage that structure? Because I think if we squint and where the current shrubs are and the proposed new flush stage that's offset, you know, let's just say Plan North, right? So it's Plan North of where the existing stage is, but where the existing stage is now bollard, you know, planters that provide a barrier. So you're just kind of swapping where the bigger mass is. And then we're kind of putting a proposal of the LMN shelters there. We'll stop saying LMN, but just like picnic shelters or human, you know, coverage, which I think would be great in that space to have. Again, that's almost in the exact same location as where the stage is. So I just kind of question removal of elements when really spatially it stays the same. So that's kind of one piece of commentary. I did want to also say, I do think the planting is important in the park. And I think that the design response is important to listen to the public, that there's like additional seating and additional planting. I do think that is much needed. And I think, you know, in raised planters is probably, you know, or some way bermed is really helpful, I think, for the conditions of a downtown environment. So that is sensitive and right. And I also appreciate that the turf mounds are gone from last time. I don't think that was a success. That would not be a successful material choice for that downtown environment. So I guess I do want to say, I think there's a lot of improvements from last time, which also begs the question of moving too fast. I wish we had seen this. We talked about this last time. I wish we had seen, I'm kind of just going on and on. I'm sorry, everyone. I wish we had seen this earlier in the process. And I know you're moving fast and appreciate that. But I think, you know, if such substantive changes are happening in a 1.5 week time frame, it really means that you're kind of running to keep up with responsiveness and design. And if it's turning in DD tomorrow, I feel concerned about the design, the level of design. I have a couple more things to say, but I'll be quiet.
Okay.
With the permanent elements, just to build off of what Phoebe was talking about, I appreciate that the team is really working to try to salvage the granite and kind of building off what you were suggesting, the granite, the stage itself, you know, there is also the column over it that it serves that really important framing device. And so is it possible to modify the form as it is so the arch is retained in its existing location? With acknowledgement to what we were talking about of how it's like these spaces keep changing, we adapt to new programming that's happening within the city while also wanting to honor existing legacies of use in the site. And so you're giving it a nod with this new form, but I'm wondering, is it possible to keep, because it still isn't like at the scale that we have currently with that arch. A lot of the times with talking about accessibility, sometimes there's a critique even within the disability community that like scraping a site becomes an excuse for accessibility. So what, you know, that tension of what you're bringing up of making the stage accessible, can we remove, if necessary, can we, if that has to be removed, can the arch itself be retained?
Yeah, and I think like spatially, and that's what I'm getting at too, exactly like we talked about that. And you take it, leave that arch, take away that part, still leaving that kind of that forum and that spatial occupation that the arch provides. And you still spatially almost have the same thing. It's just, you know, because I don't think that this is, you know, then you would flip it and you'd say, okay, then there are planted things to the north.
Was thinking about, well, as you all were discussing, it's like with a national conversation about the degrading of public speech that's happening, then if this symbolic form gets degraded by scale, that sends a cue publicly that in our public forum, that I'm wondering if there's a way, if we can uphold that symbol in this new space that you're trying to make as flexible as possible.
Okay,
Keep going.
I feel like what you're saying is the vertical component of that podium announces that something is here. If you have to bring it down to a more horizontal plane for a variety of reasons, how are you still accomplishing its visual identity as a organizing element in this park?
I'm talking, yeah, specifically about the arch.
Oh, the arch, it
over
wasn't,
the
okay,
stage.
but both.
But yeah, I mean, it's considered to be one object,
Yeah.
so.
Got it.
Yeah, it's like salvage, yeah, find some way to salvage that, deconstruct it, reconstruct it on a flat plane.
I mean, it's the source of a lot of historical public conversation, right? And it almost seems like something worth saving in itself, even if it's not your future stage.
I do think it is a moniker of the park, right? And I think that gets then to the question of like the light, the commentary of the light touch. Are there ways to use the funds to create that light touch by improving what's existing and what kind of reflects the essence of that place?
Yeah, and to me, as someone who's grown up going by this area a lot, that arch in specific on that edge of the park really is this space holder. I think of it more than the raised stage component of it. So just visually, if you're replacing that potentially with this future pavilion or something, I don't know, it's just something to think about for the identity of it.
And there's something really nice about if we're saying that the stage location is at grade anyway, even if it were to move, then getting rid of that platform, but keeping the arch.
Yeah.
You can have that thoroughfare.
Then it becomes a doorway.
Component.
And it serves spatially, I guess I'm going back to spatial, because I think a lot of these solutions are spatially based of how to kind of close down the edges, but yet make them porous, right? So each thing has there's breaks in it so you can get through, but that job is being done by that arch, and then you actually are allowing spatial holding and porosity by bringing it down to grade. Another question I have, sorry. Go on. I didn't know, I was changing topic.
Is there any other comments relative to the second point?
Yes. Well, I think by the same line of questioning, but I actually think I think that stage is more important, but I think we did bring up to, in the same vein, is there a way to maintain the edge with the current water feature as well, and with the same philosophy there. And one could say no, that it doesn't necessarily work, but is there a way to do that same kind of thing of kind of lifting up the ground plane, changing the ground plane underneath, right? Decommissioning that fountain, but allowing that to be a space holder. Because again, those are the things that have framed the park historically and kind of creating that edge. So it would be basically, when you look at it here too, it's showing that there in the green, that would be doing that same job. And this is just going back again to this thought of how do we set this up for the future? These are all comments, I think, of either holding the things that are sacred to the park now or how it's setting up in a successful implementation of future use.
Can I say that a different way? And coming at it a different lens, right? We have the artwork that is in the south. It's very rectangular and blocky. The fountain is rectangular and blocky. The arch is rectangular and blocky. The basket weave is very 90 degrees. A lot of the core elements of the original park were somewhat structured, and then we're keeping some of those structured elements, and we're introducing a variety of other things. Some curves, some berms, some pots, and all sorts of different things. To me, you're sort of stripping back the language of the solution a little bit for a multitude. And I'm struggling with that a little bit.
Essentially where the form generation coming from. Yeah, there's an additional design language that's added that doesn't feel in keeping.
Well, not even in keeping, it just doesn't seem consistent across the park or,
Are you speaking specifically to the curved?
Yeah.
Landscape seating?
I mean, some of those renders, it's just sort of like, okay, well, everything's very rectilinear. The trees are laid out in a grid pattern. The streets are 90s, right? Like there's very hard lines everywhere. And I think what they're trying to do is soften it. I don't want to speak for you guys, but you're trying to soften the lines. But it seems like sometimes you soften it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes like it just doesn't quite say that it's all been thought together to me. Like even this render, like the pots just sort of seem like they're blocking the patio, which they are there to block the patio, but they don't seem to be of the same. I don't know. They just sort of happen to be pots there, and trying to figure out how to make it one thing. You guys referenced Bryant Park earlier, the last time around. That has one language consistent throughout the park, right? I think our current park has one language consistent throughout the park.
Yeah, I kind of struggle with the same, question of like, there's this very basket weave, very predominant pattern, especially when you see it in plan. I'm not sure you really experience it that way in person, right? So I think it's sort of, that's my initial reaction seeing the plan view is like, why do we have all these curves? But, I think it's more about how you experience it in real life. And I think there's an argument to be made that it's that the pattern is sort of a field that you perceive as a field, right? And you're placing objects within that field. And I think that kind of works, but I think to Brian's point, if you go back to the plan, I think if we could kind of maybe push on that idea a little more, because I think there is still a little bit of in-betweenness and, in some areas it is trying to kind of work with the grid, but like I actually think the kind of serpentine seating that's sort of hard to see underneath the grove of trees. I think that's actually kind of successful because I can see how it kind of weaves with the rhythm of the pattern, but it's not the same thing.
It's also regular.
Yeah,
right?
but it's sort of like picks up
regularity
on the
pattern.
rhythm of it, but it's still a new curvilinear language. And I could see kind of doing that with the planters to the, page bottom left. Maybe just making those smaller and kind of making them feel like, so like kind of everything that's the new intervention kind of feels like one thing. It's sort of, I don't really care if it's rectilinear or curvilinear as long, but like I feel like the success of those other planters is that they kind of pick up on the rhythm of that, where the other ones seem a little bit more kind of scattered and just kind of placed down. So, I think that's just further design refinement, but I think just being clear about like what the intent is, I think it can work either way.
I totally
I
agree.
agree. And I think the one I'm struggling the most with is the northernmost one, because I find that the western two planters, they're engaging the pattern and then loosening up on the interior.
Yeah.
And so there seems to be one language that's happening there that I think spread across all of them could work as well. I think the serpentine feels like it could work. The grabbing an edge of the pattern and then loosening up on the interior feels like it could work. But then the all curves and all at an angle of the northernmost and west, that one feels like the anomaly to me, in that it's just kind of like loosely plopped onto the paving instead of engaging it and then intentionally loosening, which I feel if you were to say keep the arch and have this kind of more rectilinear
component, I would be curious, how could you have, is there vegetation that could engage that rectilinear component to do what is
Yeah,
being achieved here?
if we, I was just asking if we could go back to the slide where we see the rendering from street view. Maybe one, yeah, the edge that you were talking about, Wally, where the existing stage is. Yeah, this one. Yeah, to your point, it's like the plantings become the softening curvilinear component. And with the loss of that volume, the rectilinear volume of that archway, to me, it's like all the energy just drains out of this space. And it loses a lot of its physical presence in what is the downtown space with malls and, these large rectilinear forms, which we acknowledge has an 80% vacancy rate right now. But I really think you're losing a huge component of the identity of this space if you get rid of that arch volume, particularly with this perspective. So could it become a threshold into this location as compared to a barrier as you're describing it right now?
I think actually, just like picking up again on the geometries too, is that it is the Coast Salish pattern is the field and nothing in the existing park actually aligns to it. It's all object placement, and the art is the very explicit form of that. And then the Boston trees holds that center. And so I do think the additive and the arch actually is that also as well. It's an object in the field. It's a folly. So it's like the Westlake Park is designed as a series of follies. So I think with that, keeping that in mind, what is lacking success to are the amorphous planters that are not, they're not doing that job here nor there. So if they were much more clear about what their language is, that would certainly be helpful. And then, I concur about the stage. And I think it's hard also to get vertical elements, in general, there's never funding for them. So here's a vertical element that we have at our disposal that's existing. And it's a shame to deal with that.
Can we pivot to the third
Mhm.
question about equity in public space and programming? Thank you for the added content around what you found out. It's helpful. Thank you.
Yes, so the third is design response to equity in public space and programming. This could address how equity is integrated into the park design, ensure that the space and programming are accessible and meets the needs of all communities.
So one thing that we talked about last time was the ongoing engagement of Indigenous groups. I know we didn't get a chance to ask you all about that. There was one piece that you mentioned that obviously the basket weave pattern and changes to it would be a great thing to continue to engage about. I'm also curious about, you mentioned the kind of Adirondack chairs and loose kind of furnishing and the desire to support all ages. And I'm curious if that's an opportunity to engage Indigenous groups for the design of seating for elders in their community, if that's something that's part of potentially a longer term vision. But I just want us to be thinking about what are the components that allow an additive level. So what is changing and where are they able to have influence on what changes about the existing design, but also I guess potential components that can be more additive from our Indigenous community. Anyone have any thoughts about that?
The only thing I would frame it with is I think that they're intentions are very clear to retain and protect that pattern. That seems to be very clear. I guess the question is, where is their engagement and involvement with the community absent any substantive changes? It doesn't mean that they shouldn't, but absent any rethinking of it, where do those fruits, where do those labors bear fruit? If not substantive change?
Yeah, and I think that also relates to our later question about what post-FIFA vision looks like and really what falls into the current improvement project bucket and what is being retained for this for future vision. So I can hold that for that conversation as well.
And just to add to, it's great that the skate community reached out, so continued conversations with them as well as outreach, if it hasn't been made already, with groups that use this site as a public forum for gathering, not for programmed performance, but for activist communities. So having conversations as well with those groups.
The only other thing I would tag on to, and I think this is a later aspiration about that function of the park, the play component. If you're introducing play features that will attract an older group, what is that process like? How are they involved? And because that could be two potential conflict points. I think that might be part of a more expansive vision for the park, but certainly an important touch point for community involvement within the larger people that you sort of brought as well.
This is a comment that dovetails into the art programming, but for community outreach as well. I'm sure you all are familiar, but one interesting phenomena that's happening downtown is there's multiple big box businesses that are now being activated as art projects. Former Bed Bath & Beyond is now Cannonball. Bergman Luggage, Base Camp Studios, Banana Republic's, former space, also an art space. So those are some really, really interesting activations that are occurring downtown that could become really fruitful collaborative partners and community engagement work around with this site. So I'd love to encourage the team to, think about ways to maximize that dynamic that is also occurring in this location and partnerships.
A comment that I have is about the community engagement that I saw from 2 weeks ago about how people cared about making the space discouraging to homeless populations. And I think as we consider the park's design, it's important to recognize that design choices can sometimes unintentionally or intentionally create environments that are hostile to certain communities. And when addressing homelessness, a design should avoid excluding or marginalizing vulnerable populations. Like elements like seating arrangement, lighting, and accessibility can communicate messages of who is welcome and who's not. So I think being mindful of the decisions that will be made is important. Okay, we're going to move on to the next area, which is initial ideas for improving materials, plans, lighting, and artwork. This could explore how these things are used in the park's design to enhance the space and fit with its surrounding environment.
This was an area where I did have a question for the project team regarding art. Could you tell me what is the public process for potential selection and removal of art?
We would have to defer to Office of Arts and Culture on anything that's in their program. So Seven Hills is in their program. The fountain and the arch are not.
Great. Could you tell me any further insight about Seven Hills? I know in the first presentation there was mention about what its relationship and the site would be in the future for future phases, what those discussions are?
You know, we're not having any discussions about Seven Hills. That's really under Office of Arts and Culture. So we're gonna just leave that be and let them guide that process. Yeah.
And I know we're just looking at this phase right now, but in the future, I'm excited to hear more about what the vision could be for the art plan in this site for future iterations.
I forgot I did have a question not related to this too, is about lighting. Did you go over, I meant to ask before, what the lighting plan is, the lighting plans are?
So we just got a draft of it last week.
It's kind of high level.
Yeah, Darklight is looking at, in the north, I'm gonna go back to the plan. So in the north area up here, there would be a series of 6 poles that would flank either side of this where we would be able to get lights that would directionally cast down on the pavement. Jill Cody is on the design team from Darklight. She's not looking to uniformly light the space like a prison yard. We are looking to meet the standards for light levels, but we're wanting to do it in a way that makes the space feel comfortable and welcoming. Right now, I should preface this a little bit that, you know, we have adequate lighting along Pine Street and 4th. It's almost overlit right now because of the spacing. So a lot of what we're trying to do is brighten the other areas to level out the level of lighting to a certain standard that Jill would have to go into more. The tree grove is probably the Zelkovas up here to the northeast, and the tree grove itself are the toughest spaces to try to get lighting in because we've been asked to not attach anything to the trees. That has been a huge problem to date because everything is temporary and zip tied. So what they're looking at is actually a series of offset poles that somehow brings catenary light elements through the trees to give a soft glow and a warm, inviting feel and atmosphere to the tree grove. There are some shorter poles. There's about 3 of them that would kind of move through the center of where Seven Hills is, that again, we would be able to directionally add some lighting to brighten up the dark spaces, where especially in places where there are doors and entries to the building, where there have been incidents in the past in the evening with people hiding behind the elements. We are preserving, there are 3 very random light poles that are along this east edge. There's one here, and one here that we're currently looking to preserve because they are the globe fixture, which is consistent with what's on the Pike Pine corridor, as well as what was installed on 4th Avenue.
Are there catenary elements anywhere other than in the grove?
No.
So the poles are the poles are pedestrian poles that you're referring to.
The ones in the north would be 30 feet high.
Okay.
So they would be about the same height as the Cobra heads. And the reason for that is we're trying to get light aimed down to avoid glare. They're shorter as you go to the south. They're 20 feet because we don't have to, the space gets really narrow and we don't have to aim them as far. If that makes sense.
Are those 30-foot poles? Do they have
They're multi, yeah. And they would have some fixtures on them that would allow us to project patterns onto the pavement at night. It would have color changing abilities as well.
We have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, we're gonna move on to the last area, which is post DEPA vision. This could focus on how the improvements relate to the public's expectations about the role Westlake Park plays in the identity of downtown Seattle and the park's role for residents, nearby businesses, and visitors.
Can I just address that. Is that okay? This project is being designed with community residents, businesses. It is not being designed for PIFA other than it's a large gathering space and we're maintaining that. This is not a FIFA designated site, that's Seattle Center. So FIFA is a catalyst to get this project going, which is amazing. But this is a project that is there to serve the community now and moving forward. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
Agreed. I think it seems more like a deadline so that we don't have a construction project while
Absolutely.
there are people in town. I don't think it's actually FIFA designed. It's let's not have construction happening while
Yep.
the Europeans are in town.
Correct.
I think I get that.
I do think it brings up the question, so that absolutely makes sense. It does bring up the question, if this is a parks improvement plan with a tight deadline, are we retaining the public input that could not be completed within that timeline as any future visioning for Westlake occurs? So as anything happens on the south end of the site, how are we retaining the broader public input as we take care of the things that are fundable at this moment in time?
Isn't that why the perimeter and sort of setting up the continuity around the edges of the park plus rewiring for electrical things? Like, isn't that why that is more important and the things that are in the middle is less important? Like, that seems like we're going to define the boundaries now. We're going to build the boundaries now. We're going to put in upgraded electrical, get rid of the old fountain. And then we're going to focus on what's in the park once the community and the funds and all of that. Like, that's sort of how I'm hearing this is.
I guess my question is there intention to do that? Are we focusing on this park improvements project now? And then are we retaining this as a long-term vision after?
Yeah, but we already know it's not funded for at least 6 years and it's got to live as this thing.
So the tension is then what are the decisions being made right now that have long-term knock-on effects
Yeah.
for communities' sense of identity and relationship to this place? That are those decisions being made right now to meet this construction deadline.
Mhm.
And so, but as you all are mentioning, it's like focusing on improvements to lighting and things like that are, we all can agree are crucial to this location. So with making bigger decisions about the playground, for example, and its role, or removing structures, those are things that if those decisions are made right now, still will have effects down the road after FIFA, which we understand this isn't, yeah.
But the cautiousness about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to, the conversations in the planning started last June.
Yeah.
So I know you're seeing this for the first time, but these aren't, I just want to respect the process that's been underway and that it has been significant with multiple stakeholder meetings and open houses. So while it might feel rushed because we're on a timeline for construction, I don't feel that the public engagement process has been sacrificed. I think we're hearing from people as more attention is being brought on this project by the media, and we're really appreciative that we're hearing from a lot of different people, and there's some consistencies with what you're saying. But I don't think we're rushing a design process. The behind the scenes work that's happening in the Burger Partnerships office is being rushed, but we are hearing and have been hearing since last June on the drivers for this project.
You're certainly going to have a challenge with all of this reach out, and then, the bulk of the project is not this phase, right?
If we don't have the funding
Yeah.
to do the play area or the planters or things like that,
Yeah.
that would be a disappointment, but we're doing the best we can with
Sure.
what we have a lot to do.
Okay.
Okay, and we're
in 28.
Yeah, is there any final sort of comments as we transition? And I want to be respectful of the people waiting out in the hall, so it is, I'm not trying to rush us along, but I want to make sure that give plenty of time for our next people to join us. Was there any final overarching comments that anyone has?
I feel like Kate sort of just said it, but I think, I think where our collective concern is, or, is just not to have improvements now that preclude kind of future use or decisions about the space. I think in the reality, much of the programming is going to remain the same. This is intended to be a flexible open space and always will be for the city of Seattle. But I think just maintaining those kind of bigger, higher goals and the monikers of the park that already kind of are set, the Coast Salish, Arch, things that make it feel like a grounded place and like an element of Seattle, I think are, I just worry about removing them. Or I'm not sure a different benefit, right? It doesn't feel like an improvement. I do think seating planters and that many of the things that you have said are appreciated and are certainly a benefit. But there's some decisions that feel irreversible, and that is the kind of the line of questioning.
Why don't we leave it there, if that's okay with everybody? I think what we'll do is produce, we do minutes, obviously, and they'll be voted on at a later date. I've tried to capture a lot of it, but what we'll do is we provided the minute draft to commissioners to make sure that as I'm typing that the actual intent is there. And so was there anything else in closing?
Schedule's important. When's DD, when's CD, when do we interact again?
Yeah, we'll talk.
Okay.
I think some kind of a report back will be important to see how you resolve some of these. Because there's design problems and then there are other problems, and I'm sure you're both juggling at the same time.
We appreciate your input. Thank you. Thanks for having
Appreciate you
us.
coming back.
Thank you all for coming back.
Thank you.
And thank you for adding to the presentation based on some of our questions last time.
That's really helpful.
Coordination with Michael was really helpful.
Thank you. Thanks, Caitlin.
Yeah. Do we need to vote on any of that?
Yeah, we didn't vote.
And I don't even know what we're voting on.
Well, they're,
Their concept.
Like vote to,
what's their concept?
Their plans.
they didn't have a,
Whatever percent they said.
What?
they didn't have a concept.
Vote on their design. They're 60.
There's a planter in there.
90%, whatever percent.
Yeah, is there, I assumed that there was going to be a vote. You were providing some.
That's why we delayed it, right?
So how do we
Obey that.
incorporate that?
Maybe we elevate the,
Send a letter
Yeah.
instead of just minutes.
send a letter to, and essentially take the minute format, turn it into a letter. APs.
So we have strong.
Yeah.
concerns.
Appreciate the opportunity, given the state of the proposal, we want to make sure that we're on record to you in a formal letter saying, here's our, appreciate what you're doing, but here's our concerns about that are driven by restraint.
And why wasn't there a vote?
We could have voted,
Is there a way to vote now?
no.
Or
Not with them, no.
I mean, I wasn't trying to collude a vote, I don't know what you were voting on. That was part of
I think that was the issue. It's like, do we vote to allow them to go forward? They're gonna go forward anyway.
Which is why maybe a vote would be more impactful than a letter. But I mean, I think we should have votes. But I guess it doesn't. Yeah.
But what happens with a no vote? What happens with a yes vote? Does it, what's a left turn, what's a right turn? in that situation? I don't know.
I think a letter would be more impactful.
So that will be circulated for
As soon as possible.
feedback.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's why,
Yeah.
but there's stuff that I was like, I don't know how to say it. I actually think the letter is your last point.
Yeah.
I think the letter is that last one. Appreciate what you're doing. Really interesting idea. Stop. Do less.
I mean, it's what happens when there's any major sporting event in any city.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
In Europe.
Say
The
that.
critique that occurs in any city.
Sorry,
How is your city doing?
Community assets.
Michael, quick question.
Erased.
What is the WebEx
in
WebEx login?
I'm very quick to.
We're not in weather.
People are left.
Oh, yeah.
MS Teams?
So
Yeah.
whole area study.
Yeah.
I mean, the opposite is almost true as well.
Yeah.
Where you have like deal and whoever comes.
So just open the invite.
A bunch of money pours in.
But you have to make decisions about the way.
Yeah.
I would say it would,
Right.
The way you just go.
what do you think about the fact that like we're on public display
It's changed to Teams.
and now
Teams
there's
is
actually a
more
higher level of
Commonly used.
streaming?
So do you have the MS Teams?
Oh,
For
yeah.
public.
No, that's great. That's the ideal.
Yeah. I agree.
When
The
does that
time pressure seems,
Time pressure is not great for innovation or like meaningful community engagement.
I agree with that completely. Yeah.
Time pressure gets you the removal of objects
Although
and planters.
the removal of objects almost seems like a time pressure should say keep it. Like it seems like a bigger hassle to
Yeah.
scooch it north than it is just to keep it there.
Yeah.
It was not your standard thing, right?
Yeah, to be more conventional.
I asked around and I was like, there's some like rookie stuff coming in front of us, like what is the norm? And people seem to be pretty positive about it.
I think it
I don't understand what's.
This is a police issue, and I was like, I hope everybody caught that.
It's real time.
So why don't you just go ahead and send me your presentation and I can.
Yes.
I sent you one, but I'm not understanding why you're not able to.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you ever work with Andy? We tried that.
Where they're just like subtle things. Yeah.
He doesn't seem too.
Those decisions.
He doesn't have to have a definition. But this is what I think we should do.
Yeah.
Like a leadership level. But, I mean, that's clearly what they're like. Right, like doing is not the hard part in this thing.
Yes.
It's vision.
Yeah, I think,
I mean, that's what I got from asking around as well. Oh, yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
I was like, huh. Well,
Seminars in school.
put a data point on the other side.
Yes.
Sorry, but I think we're ready to go.
Let me figure out.
Yes.
I think we're ready to go with our next item, the U Alley Vacation Project. Why don't we, we'll go ahead and start with commissioner introductions. Excuse me, Kate, could you start us off?
Hi, Kate Clark, Art Commissioner.
Good to see you guys again. Brian Markham, Engineering Commissioner.
Zubin Rao, Architecture Commissioner.
Caitlin Strong, Getting Gate Commissioner.
Molly Spatalnik, Urban Design Commissioner.
Upgrade gas still planning.
I'll go Phoebe Bogert, Landscape Tech Commissioner.
Sherry City on the at-large commissioner.
Kevin, could you introduce yourself for us?
Sure. I'm Kevin Clary. I'm with Bayless Architects.
I'm Shilpa Karbe. I'm with Bayless Architects.
I'm Kristen Lundquist from Law Associates Landscape Architecture.
And we have one commissioner attending online. Kevin, could you introduce yourself? The other Kevin?
Yes, Kevin O'Neill, Transportation Planning Commissioner.
I don't think we have any members of the public attending online. Well, when we have an opportunity for public comment, we'll go back. We have a number of people who joined us today. Paul, could you start with introduction?
Sure. Molly Lawrence, outside counsel for Venice Feldman, supporting the
Beverly Barnett, Seattle Department of Transportation.
Elsie Demmer, Seattle Department of Transportation Streets. Amy Gray, Seattle Department of Transportation Streets.
And I had a brief opportunity to remind, because it's been about a year since you were back to us, and the purpose of today's meeting, and Phoebe will be taking our action today, will be to review and comment and provide input on your public benefit package. I gave them because it's been a little bit, it gave the commissioner some background about the project and was able to share some of the draft slides that you have provided. So I'll go ahead and drive for you and just say next.
Yes, I do. Thank you for doing.
Sure.
So let's start the presentation. So as Michael mentioned, we are here to present the public benefits towards alley vacation petition that was filed in November 2023. We had a meeting with the subcommittee last year, exactly almost a year ago in March. And we are here on behalf of our client, the U LLC, representing our Bayless Architects, Brumba, and Molly from Van Ness Feldman. And the couple slides that we'll go through next are essentially just a quick run through of where we are currently. So the next slide, please. So this is the project site, looking at it from the northeast corner, bird's eye view. What we see is 87th Street, which is the urban edge of Greenwood Village, urban village. And then what we have on the west of the site is a conservation parcel that's about 11,000 square feet. There is another unique feature to the site, which is the yew tree. The design of the building, the project is pivotal to that, to the tree. And there's an alley that's a remnant of an alley. It's dead-ended. There is no functional use to it. There's no vehicular or pedestrian use currently, nor are there any utilities. Next slide, please. As part of the application, we had 2 community engagement meetings. One was 2 years ago. That was mostly to introduce the development. And then one fairly recently in January this year, which was to go over the design changes that culminated as a result of the EDG, MUP, SDC subcommittee review comments, as well as changes to the owner pro forma. And we also took information from our previous community outreach meeting and folded that into the design. So this was, the latest meeting was to introduce to the community what the changes were. Moving on to the next one. Looking at the current state of affairs, that's how the building massing looks like from the same vantage point, the northeast corner. And essentially the building density changed. And also we've added more residential uses to the streets. Palatine had it already, a townhome connection. We've added a similar connection on 87th, which will unfold later. But the purpose of the vacation is to fully utilize the design potential of the site and in turn be able to provide public benefits that actually are beneficial to the neighborhood. So this is just a quick overview of the changes to the design and at the ground level. And this slide is important to us because this is an interface that is, although it is within the project site, that is the face that is interfaces with the public realm. And so here, this slide is to explain that we have made changes to the design such that most of the facades facing the pedestrian level are all residential. Next slide, please. So based on the last subcommittee review comments, what we went back, the design team went back and kind of zoomed out, looked at the larger scope of the site and noticed that there are two large public amenities. That's the two parks, Sandal Park to the north and Greenwood Park to the east. And what we realized is that the pedestrian connection there is good linkage, except for this portion where it is missing on the site, next to the site on 87th. So that we felt was an important connection that would actually complete the sidewalk linkage or the pedestrian connection. Next slide. As part of the public benefit, now we are zooming into the actual public benefit that's proposed. What you see on this graphic is the blue area is what is code minimum required as part of developing the project on site. And the orange portion, which is a sliver on the Palatine side as well as on 87th and 1st Avenue, that's something that's over and beyond code. What that includes is high level, it's new extended sidewalk connection on 87th, new widened sidewalk on Palatine and 1st Avenue. And then we've introduced some new discoveries in the neighborhood to make it a more fun activity, as well as enhancing the existing open green space. So, and what you see on the yellow is the alley. That's about 2,000 square feet. Next slide, please. So let's dive into each of these public benefits that we talked about earlier. What does the new extended sidewalk connection mean? On Palatine Avenue, what we are doing is providing 2 additional feet of sidewalk extension. That is again to promote walkability along Palatine, promote more use of that space. As you turn the corner and then on 87th, what we are doing is extending the sidewalk from the project site boundary to all the way connecting to 1st Avenue. And that includes 6 feet of sidewalk and 6 feet of planter strip built to City of Seattle code. And then on 1st Avenue, we are widening the sidewalk, the existing sidewalk, which is 6 feet, widening it by 2 feet and proposing pervious pavers since that site is a stormwater drain. So we feel that it works better given the current use there. Next slide. The second benefit is the conservation parcel. And that's the open green space. So what we got from the community was they were really excited about the fact that we are improving this open green space, that it would be available visually as well. And as they're walking around the block, they really like the sidewalk extension as well. And so we developed this further, and I will hand it to Kristen to kind of elaborate on the plantings.
Sure, let's talk about plants. So the enhancements are going to begin with yarding out some of the invasives that have taken over. There's some knotweed and blackberry, our favorites. And then establishing a temporary irrigation system so that we can get the plant material that is proposed to be planted to establish well. And then replanting with additional native plants to increase habitat and support the habitat that we've observed at the site. Currently, we're proposing kind of a backdrop of native trees that are going to do a number of things. Cedar trees, which will take the conditions of the soil and the water, stormwater conditions that we have present on the site, and some deciduous canopy trees, some river birch are proposed. Those are going to provide some seasonal color. The conifers are going to give a really nice backdrop to the proposed building, as well as additional habitat and serve to kind of reforest as part of the neighborhood. Greenwood was once known as woodlands, and there were a lot of conifer trees present, so it's kind of a nod back to that history of the site. Additionally, there are some low depressions that were graded out to hold some stormwater. There's a lot of cattail that's popped up in there, so we're proposing to reintroduce some native grasses in that area that'll take those periods of inundation. And then the edges are going to be replanted with some low native grasses, some forbs, and low shrubs that will allow views into the site. That'll help kind of provide an additional feeling of safety for pedestrians as they walk adjacent to it. And again, we'll take the soil conditions and provide that habitat and pollinator establishment. And then blooming, wet tolerant shrub materials that'll happen in the wetter zones where that material can get larger and do its thing. That'll have berries and blooms and all of the things that we want to see established in this location. Some of that is already in place. So we're just looking to enhance what's been successful there other than the invasives. Slide.
Oh.
And then additional elements that we're proposing. The fence line, as Shilpa mentioned, we're pulling that back a couple of feet on the First Avenue side. That sidewalk right now is 6 feet wide. It feels narrow because the planter strip adjacent to it is a fairly significant rain garden swale. So it slopes off right at the back of sidewalk. So by widening this, it just gives a more generous feel. There are a lot of folks who use this sidewalk, a lot of people walking dogs and kids, and will benefit from that additional width. So we're pulling that fence line back and proposing to chamfer it at the corner, which is going to open the pedestrian way visually and better connect 87th Street with First. In that additional space that's being created, we're proposing some neighborhood signage that'll provide kind of a colorful vertical element, giving directional markers to some of the neighborhood amenities, the parks, the theater, some of those elements that are so loved in Greenwood. And then provide some resting blocks. This was a comment that also came from our neighborhood community meeting, just a spot for people to sit and tie their shoes, adjust, whatever they need to do. The use of stone was also a couple of things. One, it's providing a continuity to some elements that are proposed at the opposite corner of 87th at the U building. And also, it was a request of the neighborhood so that, to use vandal-proof materials, no wood and some of the things that have taken a beating in the neighborhood. And then decorative fence panels. This is an opportunity to provide some interesting discovery elements around the edge of the conservation parcel, providing information about the flora and fauna that is found in the conservation parcel and some storytelling about the history of Greenwood when it was once referred to as woodlands. And then introducing birdhouses within the conservation parcel, a few different heights so that we can provide some nesting for the songbirds, chickadees, nuthatches, and wrens that are really prevalent in the area and provide a little pop of color in there as well.
Did you say that there was seating, sorry to interrupt your flow, did you say that there was seating down at Palatine?
At the corner of the U building, around the U tree, we're
Oh,
proposing some
okay,
seating.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Sorry.
And on that slide as well, what we heard from the community, the previous slide, where we have the wayfinding sign. What we heard from the community is that they would like that to be multilingual because there are a lot of, the community has a lot of people that are different languages and cultures. And so in supporting that, they would like it in multiple languages. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick overview again of reiterating what the public benefits are in a diagrammatic way, just to see what each of the benefits included. Next slide. And I mean, I could. So, and this is a matrix in support of all of those, each of those public benefits, and includes sidewalk improvements on Palatine Avenue, the 2 feet wide sidewalk easement, extension of the sidewalk on 87th, widening of the sidewalk on First Avenue with pervious pavers, and conservation parcel enhancements, and then sidewalk enhancements on First Avenue. So these are a few views of, again, now we had looked at the northeast corner from a bird's eye view, coming down to the street, looking at what that street interface would look like. This is on 87th. Then as you walk down 87th West, next slide. This is from the northwest corner, looking at the project as well as the conservation parcels, the public benefits, the sign, and the use of the extended sidewalk. Next slide. That's a close-up of the conservation parcel, what that would look like. Next slide. And this is as we walk around the corner on First Avenue and then looking from the Fred Meyer side down at the conservation parcel. So this provides us a good open area and a good respite for from the built forms. Next slide. That's the end of the presentation. In conclusion, we feel that the public benefits that are proposed are our efforts to activate the urban edge and promote walkability and accessibility in the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I know that we would like to open comments and including comments from city agencies. Would you like to start with any input and then
We're the only
agency?
So do we need to stand up so Kevin can?
Yeah.
But he knows what we look like.
He does, he does.
Where do we stand for Kevin?
Stand by us, you're good.
Behind Michael?
Yes.
Okay, well, this is.
Beverly, I
about-
can see you. I can see you.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. It's nice to be back here and it's nice to be back with this project too. I didn't realize it had been so long.
Yes, almost 2 hours now. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. So overall, I think the project has evolved in very positive ways. As you guys know, the developer stepped back and was looking at the number of units, the makeup of units and some things like that. So it stepped us back. And Kelsey's worked on the SIP from the very beginning, so she's going to talk about some of the street edge stuff. But it feels very positive. I live one neighborhood over, so I'm very familiar with the area, and it feels like the project just fits right in. Greenwood now is becoming really hip, and this is going to be, I think, a great addition. As the project has evolved within SDOT, we had wanted to be clear on what are obligations from design review or from the code or from, standard practices, and what would really rise to the level of being beyond code and be public benefit. So, we do want to make sure on that. And I think, the one gravel strip, I have some questions about that, and Kelsey's going to talk about the materials. But I think we're at a pretty good spot in understanding the obligations of the project and what would be public benefit. I will say, I think the evolution of the use of the conservation site and the amenities associated with that, they just look cool. I mean, I can see people walking by, going to Fred Meyer or, Taproot Theater, and being really charmed and engaged by the art around the site and the enhancements. So I think those look impactful, maybe beyond what they are. They just seem as a package that it's arresting, I think, when you walk by. So I really like that. The streetscape looks good as well. And I think, as you guys know, when we look at public benefit, it's an old-fashioned balancing test. So we look at what is the public giving up, this great half alley to nowhere. What does the developer achieve? And it is important to the developer in making the project actually work. And how is that balanced with what the public achieves? And it feels like a pretty good balance. I think we still need one more go around with the latest iteration and the material change on the Fred Meyer side of the project. But I feel like the project's in a good place. And I just think the evolution of the work on the conservation site has been really, really good. I think might be a new member or two since then. So the conservation site was acquired in, I think, 1972. It's related to a rezone. So it exists. And, it's just mainly drainage. That area is just a big bog. But with these enhancements, I think it really brings it to life. I think the one thing we wanted to be really careful is that normal maintenance of such an important site isn't a public benefit. It's just an owner responsibility. And it feels like the changes and the art and everything does move beyond what they should do, just their Saturday maintenance, and rise to the level where it's part of the public benefit package. So I think it's in a good spot. I think the community is going to be really satisfied. I think the sidewalk, finishing out the sidewalk on the block, also is a big deal. Neighborhoods without sidewalks, it's always a bit problematic. So I think it's good. Any questions for me? Otherwise, I think Kelsey wants to make some comments on the street use review. So Kevin, can I sit down
If
now?
I could just, Beverly.
Well, Beverly, can I ask you a question while you're up?
Yes.
So the only question I have is, again, in terms of staff's role, given the original purpose of the conservation easement, which you mentioned, I presume SPU has been involved with the review and your work at a staff level. Are they satisfied with what they're seeing here?
I don't know that SPU has had any involvement. This is privately managed. They have standards from 1972, but the city has, the utilities have not been engaged with this. We can certainly do that, before we look at the next steps with council, but you guys, we haven't looked, SPU has. Yeah, we'll add that on, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I have a question. Whose drainage is obligated to, whose drainage parcel is this?
The
We
ownership.
own it.
The
Is
ownership.
this question to me?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the ownership owns it. It was actually a PUDA done not that long ago. It was within the last decade as part of the development of the Morrow.
Okay.
And it was set up as overflow for storm drainage, but my understanding is it's not really functioning that way. at this point.
I did want to point out, Beverly, to your comment. I know early conversations along 87 or on First Avenue there, we were thinking gravel, but between the last time we spoke
Uh-huh.
and this presentation, we pulled the gravel away and we're proposing to use pavers as a hard.
Oh, okay.
Pervious pavement.
So this was on the papers. We'll see what she thinks about paper. Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Pervious pavement.
First pavement.
And Kelsey, could you introduce yourself? Kelsey was, yeah,
For Kevin.
and the role that you play in sales and transportation.
My name is Kelsey Timmer. I'm with SDOT Street Use. I work in the development review group, so I work with private developments at their early stages to identify code required street improvements and help them meet the code required standards. So I review the initial 30% street improvement permits and also look at the 60% as well as it continues to move along. I have been working with this project. And I do think that the extension of the sidewalks are great, especially along North 87th in front of the conservation parcel. Generally, we would expect to see sidewalk being put in where there isn't sidewalk when a private development comes in, but this parcel is not going to be developed as conservation parcel. So there wasn't really another clear mechanism for getting sidewalk adjacent to it on North 87th. So I do think that that's a great public benefit. As Beverly alluded to, I did want to make a couple comments about the proposed 2-foot buffer along First Avenue. She already kind of addressed the gravel conversation from a couple of weeks ago. I was going to say that I chatted a little bit with traffic operations, and generally they're not a huge fan of gravel right next to a sidewalk. It kind of tends to migrate and get a little messy, create, small obstructions on the sidewalk. So pervious pavers that are not gravel or even plantings would be acceptable for that 2-foot buffer area. Because it really is, providing shoulder room. For it to be considered a sidewalk, it does need to meet sidewalk standards, which would be Portland concrete cement with 2x2 scoring. But still, even as a buffer, it is still definitely considered and viewed from traffic operations perspective as a benefit to have that shoulder room between the edge of the sidewalk and the fence. So that was really my main comment. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then we'll open it up if there's anyone online who wants to provide public comment. Okay, and at that, we will turn it over to Phoebe for questions round and then conversation.
Do you want me to put up a particular slide? I can start here, and if you guys need,
Yeah.
I'm driving the presentation.
Right, I think that's fine. And then I thought we would just go around the room for the questions and then put forward the set of deliberation. Which are pretty straightforward, I think, shortly. So we could start with Kate and just go around as needed.
Has there been any, well, first of all, thanks for this presentation. It's really great to see its development, just to echo everybody else's comments. Very excited by the direction the conservation parcel has gone, because I remember when the project was first being presented, it was wasn't being touched at all. So it's a huge development. And I was curious to learn a little bit, or to learn a bit more, if you have any sense of how the decorative panels will be designed, or where it's at right now in that.
We're just starting on the design of that, looking at laser cut, painted material that can be attached to a fence, or integrated as part of that, so that it's easily cleaned and can be maintained nice. So the imagery shows 410, but we're also looking at other materials.
And so the fence, is it chain link then that it would mount to? that you're thinking of? And does that chain link, is it existing now or would that be,
The existing fence will be replaced.
it will be replaced? And was there consideration of other fence types than chain link?
There is, yeah, there definitely is. We're looking at other small, non-climbable, fence materials that, I shouldn't say non-climbable, difficult to climb.
Those are my questions. Thanks.
I'm trying to remember back the last time we saw you guys. I think that the questions of like, where's garbage being picked up was probably our number one thing. Like if we're not.
You are number one.
I think that's a fair statement, actually. Thank you. And I'm assuming that's all worked out. I think another question was what is the aesthetic of that wall that faces the easement, or not the easement, but the vacant land, right? As that will be a finish neighborhood facing thing.
Could you go to that?
Oh,
I
sorry.
think
was
this is
stuck on
our
the
first
side.
render of that side.
Yeah, it's towards the end, I know, yeah.
I was really stuck on the solid waste then. Sorry.
Yeah,
Cute.
it's number one.
Is this?
No, keep going. There's a rendered view.
It's the.
It's towards the end.
Oh, right. Oh,
Yeah.
here.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go one backwards, kind of those,
So,
hold back.
Yeah, to answer your question, what we have is board form concrete, that would alternate with, just regular concrete and board form concrete in vertical panels. And that's to mimic, or kind of draw from the concept that we have going for the upper masses.
The brown is board form?
Not the brown, the base at the,
Oh, I thought that looked like mesh into the parking.
yes, it alternates. We have openings as well, that will have metal mesh. And that is to bring in natural light and ventilation into the park.
Yeah.
There was a significant change in this facade between when you saw it last and today through the design review process that really changed this whole facade to actually, because if you remember, it was somewhat flat and they didn't necessarily have the same unit counts. Now the units are actually much more visible than they were in the previous iteration.
Yeah, and it's this design concept, what we did was, as I mentioned, the tree was the yew tree was pivotal to the design. So it's actually based on growth rings of a tree trunk. So it's like each of these tiers is a ring in elevation, and that hence that curve at the west wall, that current mass is reduced as well. And we've reflected that in our colors and our materiality. It's all vertical siding as well.
Is the back of the building similar to this then as well?
The back is similar, so.
Because that faces a parking lot and not as significant, but
Yeah, it's similar to what you would see on 87th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember in the last presentation, there's a lot of focus on the other corner. Is the seating, I remember you were talking about having a seating plan on the other
Yeah,
site. Is that, where is that?
it's by that tree at the corner. So we have some boulders and
That area is still proposed, it's just not part of the public benefit.
Okay. But it utilizes stone.
It does, the yew tree, there's gonna be native plantings under that, and that's gonna slope down, and we're using, stone to create kind of a more organic condition there with seeding and so forth, and those elements are being repeated at the corner of 87th and First. In a smaller way, but.
good.
My only question was, is that space where the U is that accessible to the public? Because I think in a previous iteration, we had seen that kind of fenced off or something. Is that?
so
The sidewalk is pulled back there, so there's a little bit more circulation space, but there's a sizable area of that that is not accessible physically because we want to maintain that the yew tree itself. It will be landscaped.
That was my only question.
I have no questions. Thank you.
I'm curious with the adjacent traffic circle, if you can just share with us what you studied, what worked, what didn't work. Related to the adjacent traffic.
Right here.
So when we looked at this, and we sort of, earlier proposals, we kind of tried to engage that corner, and we were trying to look at broader. We kind of pulled back in and just looked at the site as a whole. So we, at that point, took on conservation corner. So when we started to revisit going back to the traffic circle, it just became too much of a fight. So we didn't really look at other options for that at this point in conjunction with what we're proposing here.
Okay, great, thank you. And then you mentioned that on Plan West, that is previous paver gravel now. The portion on Plan East, that is an extension of the sidewalk. Yeah, just want to clarify. And then a little more on Kate's question about the fence. So are you engaging artists for the work on the fence, or is the project team completing the fence design?
The project team.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions for me. I'll pass it to Ray.
You stated, fellas, to ask for further clarification. So on 87th, there'll be a 8-foot wide sidewalk, not including the planting strip.
On 87th is 6 feet.
You're not, but aren't you, where are you increasing it by 2 feet?
On Palatine and First Avenue.
Okay. So the sidewalk on 87th will remain, it's a 6-foot sidewalk.
6-foot
6
sidewalk.
foot clear.
Yeah.
One of the big differences between Palatine First and the difference with 87th is on Palatine and First, the perimeter strips are those rain garden bioswales versus on 87th, it'll be tree pit and planter so that.
It's more of a level condition.
Yeah.
And just to finish the thought, but when you're done on First Palatine, there will be 6-foot wide sidewalks. If we consider the 2-foot extension as a sidewalk now.
8 feet.
8, that will be
On
8
Palatine.
and on both.
6
sides.
plus 2.
Thanks.
My only question was the trees you're showing on 87, are those existing?
No, they're
So there are a few.
There are a few existing trees within the conservation parcel that are gonna stay, but there are no existing street trees in the planter strip. So those will be new. The planter strip itself is new.
So the few that are existing before that on the 86, are those getting removed?
Some of them are because they've died. But the ones that are healthy and viable stay.
But everything else is there.
Correct.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question about and thank you, we looked at this the other day in subcommittee, so appreciate also the changes they made to the presentation. I think it's really helpful. Just quickly about the planting, the conservation site. You mentioned, which is a good approach, to keep lower planting at the edges. When I look at the current conditions, there's high planting all the way to the edge. So my question is there, I know there's selective, there will be invasive removal. Is there also selective plant
Yes,
removal?
I think, yes.
Okay, so like, okay.
And some of that is gonna be necessary, Phoebe, because it's gonna be very difficult to get the invasives out
Without disturbing
without-
others,
yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Okay. And then planting plan, this is sort of asked before, so your planting strategy is based on just knowledge. It's not informed by SPU or kind of
Correct.
other conservation organizations. Okay. And then the last one is about the maintenance plan discussed.
Yes.
Can you just talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, the maintenance plan is gonna involve, it's a quarterly maintenance plan. It's gonna have more intensive maintenance, different seasons of the year. The intent is for monitoring to be part of it. Monitoring plant health, monitoring pests, using integrated pest management to control that. Monitoring the irrigation system to make sure that they're not overwatering, but plants aren't, struggling during the extreme heat in the summer. So we know those periods are getting more intense. And then selective removal and management of invasives, because we know that's going to be something they're going to have to stay on top of. Make sure they don't reintroduce.
Captured that on the last slide.
So the owner has allotted dedicated additional funds for additional maintenance over
And
time.
On which slide?
22. These are additional slides that we had just.
Oh, here, this?
Yeah, we gave just an outline, just a summary of.
And that's like a 20-year time frame, perpetuity.
TBD. I mean, it's gonna have to be multiple years for sure, because I mean, those non-natives have to establish, so.
Are you guys doing anything with the building runoff, feeding the park, or any sort of combination of the two? Hardscape.
Given that repeat site, all everything's just getting routed straight down to earth pipes below the building to rehydrate the peat.
That's a question that's not strictly a purview, but it relates to some of the policy objectives in all this. Is there, what is the parking provided in the building per unit?
It's about 50%.
50%, okay. I really just mention it because like these projects and the increased density in the city, it just, wider sidewalks seem like something that is not always there. So this is more than the comment and question, but I think it's significant to add 2 feet.
Thank you.
Do you have a parking requirement?
No. Zero parking requirement is.
From
Leasing.
the city, from the leasing, because when we.
Yeah, it's an amenity that is saleable, right? Like.
It is, and it just helps put people in the building.
Because of your transit frequency, there is no code requirement.
Right, we're in the, village.
Close enough.
Okay. Are we ready to discuss? Okay. I just have 4 overall buckets, and let's talk about them as, as a group. Don't need to go around the room, just clarifying that again. So the first one, just overall improvements to meet public benefit, just commentary on that. So then to reiterate, Michael's nicely put them on the screen, that it's the extension of the sidewalk, widened sidewalk on First and Palatine, new discoveries in the neighborhood, and then enhance the existing green space, right? So just overall commentary on that, and that meets public benefit. Number 2, just the overall design and building response to previous comments, or just any additional values you want to put in there, especially I think in terms of how the building is relating to those public benefits proposed. Number 3, just overall response to public engagement, and how that's manifesting in the design. And then number 4 is kind of a subset of the public benefit, just looking at the overall plan for art, signage, birdhouse, kind of these fencing, Kate brought up a bit, just that overall piece of the package, because that is kind of additional past the scope of the project. Anything else? So 4 tiers. No? Okay, let's go. So first, public benefit. How do we all see the proposed public benefit? Any additional comments, concerns?
So Phoebe, I'll weigh in. I think the sidewalk additions and extensions are really appropriate. It feels like they meet what you've heard from the community. I live fairly close to this site and I'm pretty familiar with this area. One thing I would point out is that along First Avenue, that is a stay healthy street. And as was pointed out, there's a fairly large park just to the north, Sandell Park. So I think that this part of First gets a lot of pedestrian and bike activity too. So I think the added sidewalk width here, even though it's 2 feet, is a thoughtful improvement. Obviously, completing the sidewalk on 87th is going to be very desirable to the neighborhood here. So I think that element of the public benefit is very appropriate. The only question I have, and this is why I asked about the SPU, is since the conservation easement improvements are a pretty big part of the public benefit, I would just want to make sure that that planting plan is really thoughtfully done. And I'm outside my area of expertise in being able to comment on that, but I just hope that that should be a factor in the final implementation. Thanks.
I guess I'll just comment that I think we've seen great improvements since the last time we were here, and I think the alley, yes, it was an alley to nowhere, but I think I was one of the more vocal commissioners that it still represents open space and at grade open space, and there is value to the neighborhood in terms of light and air and those kinds of things, and just the size and length of building that alleys kind of prevent buildings from growing too large. So I think all the improvements that have been incorporated now, in my mind, definitely outweigh the loss of the alley, in terms of public benefit. So I think it's just really great that, we're kind of connecting the sidewalks and going around the corners and kind of making that green space more intentional and sort of, it'll feel more like a place that's supposed to be there to the community instead of just this kind of like overgrown thing that just feels like a remnant parcel or whatever. So yeah, I think the public benefit is totally appropriate to the loss of the alley at this point. So it's really, really great work and good progress, I think.
I agree, and I feel like the added clarity as it came to the last subcommittee and here now of what is public benefit, and so not focusing on that kind of more private view corner, but really focusing on how it extends to the adjacent parcel and extends the sidewalk amenities and seating. I think it's a lot clearer. And I also think that speaking to the replacement of an alley and what it does also provide a location for things like garbage pickup. And so seeing the resolution of that component between the last time that we saw it and now is quite meaningful to me and Kate.
I smell a subcommittee.
Yeah. Just for alleys.
Solid waste subcommittee.
I have one, I love this sign idea. It would be really special if we could somehow tell the neighborhood that this is not a leftover piece of land, like it's not undeveloped, but it's intentionally a nature reserve. You could put a sign to that effect, that would be brilliant, because I think there are vacant lots that are undeveloped. This is not one of them. This is a purposeful thing. To me, I love it, but I think maybe education and informing the neighborhood about it is as important as actually doing it.
Agreed. There are a lot of school kids.
Yeah. Little
Elementary, there's
on the fence would be
an opportunity. for schools, yeah.
like, shh, nature. Yeah.
And that's part of the new discoveries in the neighborhood piece.
That'd be great.
To build up on that, I think that's where, and I know we're getting to it, and Kate really talks about this, but the design of the fencing and how attractive that is, the level of transparency, and is it just a fence, or what kind of opportunities that brings, especially with the public development, that sidewalk, and with the widening it, and it's gonna really affect that experience. And I know that's still under design, but it would be great to see that.
Yeah, it does seem, since part of it is about giving more presence to this conservation parcel, that having a new fence type that encourages visual transparency is important. Chain link obviously does that, but if it is the same visual language as the existing fence, then you lose an opportunity to showcase the space. So I would encourage the team to consider a different fence type, just to frame and give view lines in a way that kind of really celebrates the location.
I didn't mean to say subcommittee that I smelled more, but this is a perfect topic for a subcommittee because they still are making choices about fencing, how the fence, whatever artistic solutions are applied or integrated, and its relationship to some of the other opportunities. I think you do need to see it. It's a perfect topic for a subcommittee, so you can see what solutions have been brought to bear based upon it.
And see the holistic proposal.
Yeah.
Because I think there's obviously, I'm sure, like a budgetary constraint
Sure.
too. And one of the things, is like changing the gauge, there's those relationships of what those panels could be and then changing the gauge of the fencing, even if it's just a smaller aperture could help, or if it's flat vinyl in lieu of galvanized, which it is now, right? So like that attracts eye as opposed to diminishing it. So it feels like there's a number of different variables that they could play with to keep it within reason, I suppose.
I agree with that, but it's like, can be.
I mean, I question the other way, like how much do we need to nitpick on a fence, but
Well, I would say that I would like
That's a
to
question.
talk, when we get to the art section, I'd like to talk more about that, which could be part of that treatment and discussion.
Well, why don't we just move to that section now and then we can.
So thinking of subcommittees, we did have a subcommittee for a similar private development project, the Yesler Terrace project, that had a public artwork that was funded by the project. And I would really love to encourage the project team as part of the public benefit proposal to work with an artist for the fence art. As I mentioned in the last meeting we had for this project, the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, just as an example, have a roster of artists that are regional and even that live within this neighborhood. There's a huge opportunity here to build in really specific community-based imagery that's generated from an artist that lives in this area that could at least collaborate with the design team. There's plenty of design team models where the artist comes up, for example, just with the file of the imagery that then gets, fabricated by the design team through waterjet or laser cut or anything like that. So particularly if, you're getting input from people in the neighborhood that they want it to be a multilingual artwork, you're getting to the point of specificity and desire that you're hearing from all of your great community outreach work, that I do think it would be a huge loss to not consider working with an artist that's connected to this location. And just to say, $90,000, that is a budget amount that could cover that type of work. We're seeing on the Public Art Advisory Committee similar budget amounts for a similar scope. In fact, that could potentially be sort of a generous budget for a water jet fence treatment. So I just would really like to encourage the team to consider that also as part of the public benefit. You point to it with new discoveries in the neighborhood. I think you should make it more specific in terms of having that be within the artwork and working outside and collaboratively with your team with another artist.
I would add to that the fence selection can support the success of that art.
else on the signage? Birdhouses, does anybody have comments about birdhouses? Brian?
No, I'm staying out of birdhouses.
Okay. Moving on, I mean, these of course meld together, just making sure we hit the response to public engagement. Do we feel it has responded?
It sounds like the seating was a response and it's even looking nicely.
And the language issue, that was, I did not know that that was something, and clearly they're using it as an organizing principle for some. It was interesting to hear that. And I think you were really good at saying, you've got this opportunity, so let's explore how it could be integrated in the public benefit package.
Yeah, it's a pretty big surface area.
Okay. One last, did we just want to talk about anything other about the building? You know, Brian has brought up the blank facades, anything else about the overall project?
Definitely one. I am very appreciative of the team's response since we last saw this in the full commission meeting. The way that the residential units are engaging the northern edge, the way you have ground floor units in an area that was one wall. I mean, we talked about that in the prior session, and it was very nice to see that. I think it contributes to the actual physical public benefit that you're providing, to have those eyes on the street, to have that residential character on that side, to not have a blank facade along a new sidewalk. And so very, very appreciative of that development. It's great for the project and for the neighborhood.
Good here. It's like the first time in forever that we've got time. Okay. Is there any other comments? I feel like our questions have been answered.
I think maybe this question was already asked, but I'm curious, are there any trees that are being removed in the parcel?
There are a few trees that have died, and those are going to be snagged or removed.
Okay, yeah.
There are some that are right at the perimeter that we're proposing to remove.
Yeah.
They've been pulled apart and used for clothes hangers and a variety of things over time, and
I'd love to encourage, yeah, I mean, as you know better than me, but snags form important elements.
yeah, the
too.
ones deeper in the site that
Yeah.
inside, we're proposing to snag them.
I'll add to that.
Yeah.
I mean, because I commented before, I do think the strategy of kind of it is a conservation parcel, but at the same time, it's human made, right? So
Yeah.
I think curating the views in and, you know, evaluating what feels safe and also like making it a healthy ecosystem is important. And so, yeah, I do encourage some removal because that it is kind of also kind of part and parcel to the extension of First and giving that 2-foot buffer. When you're there, you do feel quite enclosed, and you've got a bioswale on the left, and it's doing pretty well. And then you've got, you know, a lot of like robust planting on the right. So giving that breathing space, I think, is really important visually and physically, and for a safety component as well. It is a curated, designed landscape that is then meant to do its thing.
Could we go back to the bird houses for a second?
Yes, please.
Who were going to construct that? Do you guys have plans for that?
Those are most likely going to be, you know, purchased birdhouses.
Yeah, I see the birdhouses as an opportunity for public art, like maybe getting arts involved to construct them. It'd be a cool idea.
We just want to make sure that they're done properly, that the sizes are correct, the type of birds, down to the height. There is a little bit of a science to that.
I guess this just back to you or what you usually do.
Yeah, so thank you to the project team, and we really appreciate some updates. And also thank you to SDOT Street Youth. Before we take action, I'm curious if from our comment, if there's anything that you heard that you feel you need to clarify before we move into action.
Do we move on to public, the roster that you mentioned about?
Yeah, I can give an example of how it's been used before for private uses. So you still would have, so it's a roster, you know, of like 400 artists. It sounds like you already have access to it. We can also send you a link. But so you can filter it by the way the artist works. The Office of Arts and Culture has sometimes helped with coming up with a short list of potential artists to consider for private projects. I did that for the Seattle Parks Foundation recently. And so then the project team still can have oversight over the selection of the artists. Since you still, you know, have a lot of choice, obviously, in who it would be a good fit for your project team. So that's just one example of a database of artists. If you want to have a slightly more democratic process in the selection of the artists, you could also do something. Sometimes with opportunities like this, you could have a short list where you devote a small budget, even like $5,000, to a short list of artists developing a range of proposals that funds, and then you select from that, which allows even a little more control from the project team. So anyways, there's different ways you can do it to get artists involved based off this existing resource. And you can give guidance in terms of themes, imagery, all of that you have already, you know, collected from your community engagement work.
Great. Are there any other points of clarification you want from us? Okay, great. I'll pass that.
Katie, that's great. So again, thank you. This went really well. Appreciate all of your work and attentiveness to the commentary. So overall, the commission appreciates the sidewalk extensions. They feel appropriate and feel like a significant benefit to the community. It was also pointed out that First Avenue is a stay healthy street. And so really those kind of improvements along that corridor are significant and really will be noticed. So that the broader reach and understanding of the community does read through here. We appreciate the approach to the planting at the conservation easement. Does have a sensitive approach to native and adapted species, and then also for ecosystem health, but also community and pedestrian health. So just, you know, that balancing of what it is to be kind of a natural parcel, but in an urban environment is important. We do also appreciate the responsiveness of the facade and, you know, ground plane approaches. I think, as we've been said it nicely, of just that this does feel like a replacement of adding building where there was an alley and keeping that light and air and the sentiment of light and air. This is a reasonable replacement of the relationship of the ground floor to the conservation easement is well received. We do feel like education is a really valuable addition to the community and is cited in the signage and in the birdhouses and in the art. So we do feel that will be valued and does need to feel intentional. I'll get to the next part later. We do think, does feel that you have responded to the community's input. You know, that kind of manifests in the seating at the corner, some of those like very small scale, but kind of important ways of allowing pedestrian circulation and making a place that felt like a remnant space actually feel like it's part of the community. it does feel like that is a responsive, direct correlation to what you've heard. We also appreciate very much the ground floor units on 87th. Again, that's going in hand and making this a complete project, but really responding to what your public benefit is and making sure there's a correlation of the lived experience on the street as well as in the building. I think with that, I don't have any more comments. We would like to, I think we have one condition, and that is to have a subcommittee for the art and slash fencing slash signage package. We would love to see that development. And it is our recommendation to work with an artist team. And as you just began that conversation with Kate about the public art roster, but really imbuing and embedding the local artist scene is a great opportunity and potentially a missed opportunity if it's not included in this collaboration. And it does feel like it could be a collaboration, not necessarily like artist goes off and does their thing, but something that this is coming together to really enhance this, again, to the overall public benefit. And one more recommendation is to make sure the plant list and planting approach is vetted with SPU or King County or.
I should have mentioned they did use those resources.
Yeah, I'm figuring you did. Yeah, exactly. So just, just ensuring that that kind of goes through the process is important. But first initial evaluations, it looks appropriate. So any other things to add? Okay. Shall we vote?
I vote to approve with recommendations.
I also vote to approve. Vote to approve.
Vote to approve.
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 I too vote to approve with recommendations.
Vote
and the
to
condition
approve.
of subcommittee.
Thanks, Kevin. Excellent. And I think the only thing we'll do is follow up with Molly and the team and Beverly about the timing of the subcommittee relative to your next steps to get to city council. Thank you. Very good. Nice to see how the project's progress.
Thank you.
One thing just to note, I know that sometimes it can be annoying to a project team when it's like, here is this one other X factor, bring in this other person. But I will say that because it is such a simple opportunity for a surface, there's so many great precedents that can make it really easy for a collaboration like this. And beyond that, it really extends your reach within the community as well, because even just by advertising this opportunity, by talking about it, it shows even more goodwill in your public benefit work that in its own is like a promotional effort for the project beyond actually what comes out of it. So just one thing I wanted to note for that.
And I would say you can also be quite explicit in your requests for proposals about the parameters of what you're looking for from an artist, and that can really help you, manage that process and not make it beyond itself.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Beverly. Beverly, you're in my head. Valerie wanted to talk to you a little bit before the roundtable, since we have a little bit of extra time. That way we can maybe come back at like 12:45, a little bit earlier. I know that we sent you a lot of information to prepare for you for today. Clearly, you have your own individual collective history of the reviews. So I feel like you're really well prepared. We have these 4 questions to, in my mind, will help drive the conversation, but one well-asked question sometimes turns into 7 more that build on itself. So to the extent that it gets this conversation going, I think we've been talking, Kevin and Molly and Valerie and I, about let's just see where it goes. Like, we've got 20 minutes for each question. We're just gonna start out in a place. Let's just see where we end up during that time period. I think one of the goals for us from a staff perspective and with Kevin and Molly, I think what we want to do is to come up with some kind of a list of takeaways or action items or whatever that might be to not only memorialize what we talked about today, but look for action items that are relevant to 2026 BLE. What did we learn? What worked? What didn't? And come up with a very specific list of whether that's an observation or a request to move forward with. Because again, and I'll Valerie's teeing up the thing she wants to talk about. I think we all conceptually, when the idea of a staff review panel came about, thought it was going to be a certain thing, and for a lot of very good reasons, morphed into something broader. I think what you're going to hear from the city team is, we want to help you with information that help you make good recommendations. The staff review panel concept has become problematic for them. I think that's what you're going to hear in terms of how much information is actually being prepared and what's actually relevant for you all in making your recommendations. So, and I think it's a totally legitimate question to come out of today. Here's what we thought it was going to be. Here's what it turned out to be. What's really useful for you in that body of work? I think it's also gained value for them because it's forced them to work together in ways that it's not clear that they wouldn't be doing, but it's helped them focus from an interdepartmental or an intra-departmental team concept about they want this information, so we need to stop that through.
Anyway, how much time do we have?
Break it noon.
So I resent an email this morning, so that should be toward the top inbox with kind of my tips on what you might want to remember to ask about. And Michael pretty much just covered what I was going to probably cover anyway, but it's just a reminder that there's this thing called the staff review panel that was meant to pull together all the city information and stuff that's going on and communicate it to us before we do our reviews. And we went through one round of reviews and experienced that. And so now today is just the download about that. Like what worked for you, what didn't work for you. But it's a pretty important juncture for you to identify what, you know, sort of what is it that you need from the city of Seattle before your reviews when you're interfacing with Sound Transit. And so, yeah, I guess to me, if those of you who were around for the reviews, if you can think back to looking at the Elridge station or looking at the West Seattle station, you know, what information did you get that was super important when you were thinking about it? And what would you rather see, or what else would you have liked to have seen? And then I'll just say, and then also think just kind of like, did you get it in writing? Did you hear from city staff? Did you hear from me? Did I filter it for you? You know, it probably matters how you get this information. So just be thinking about that when they're talking to you, because what we heard from Sarah Maxana in the quarterly update was they felt like it was a really heavy lift to try to keep us looped in. And so they're looking for, and we need to be helping them identify how to streamline this. What's the quickest way to take what is essentially a year of planning work, analysis, thought access improvements, you know, stuff from super big picture, like what does the comprehensive plan say for this Delridge neighborhood now that it's going to get a light rail station, all the way down to heck, how are the buses gonna stop there when you have all this traffic getting on the West Seattle Bridge? Like, we have super detailed stuff that we need to know about walking into the reviews. And we also need to know what's the big vision for this neighborhood. So that's a lot of information, and the city is definitely struggling with this question, and they feel sort of like we're saying, we want to know everything. And I'm thinking, and Molly and I talked about this, like, it's really, we need people who know everything and can distill it down to bite-sized nuggets for you all. So big picture, when we're talking to them, I think that is the big challenge. It's like, we all know we need to know something. If we walk in the door and look at what Sound Transit shows us, and we don't know what the city's been doing for a year to get ready for this, then we're gonna say things that probably aren't gonna be super, or might not. I mean, usually it's actually okay, because we all are kind of have the same types of hats on. But, city staff are kind of working on the same types of things that you all are, and we all know, kind of where we're all going. But if we actually knew what they were thinking about, say, the transportation network in West Seattle and how that's going to shift around when you have these two stations, then we can make comments that support that. So.
Is there a way that we can help them understand what things we're going to be reviewing and at what stage? And I'm thinking the opposite way in terms of like when a design team schedules their deliverables, there's a certain amount of things that we deliver at SD that we deliver at PD. Is there a SDC version of that in the opposite of like, at 30%, we're going to review this, like the neighborhood plan overall and how it attaches to all the other modes of transit?
There is, and Lindsay basically put it together from the city. It's called the Design Elements Matrix. It's like a matrix that says, at PE at 30%, 60%, and then it's a huge matrix that kind of goes into a lot of detail about what specifically we should comment on, like entrance locations and stuff, and also kind of the information that we need, which, at PE is like the bigger planning and so there is this thing called the development, the element, the matrix, basically. When she talks about that, that's what she's talking about. So with Sound Transit, we mapped out really early on what we're gonna look at when.
Okay.
So that's clear.
We had input to that.
Yeah.
We did.
Great.
We did it with Sound Transit and with city staff. Yeah, I think the disconnect is that a lot of the city staff haven't done capital project development.
Yeah.
And so they know, they see the words, but they don't understand, they don't connect it with what information we might need for that.
We told them very early on, really early on, we actually have a handbook that's quite helpful.
Yeah.
In telling you what it is that we need as indicators, and that handbook and those indicators are concepts connected, were developed jointly between not only commissioners, but people who come here.
Mm-hmm.
And their attempt to do this design metrics, I think, is in response to that. And I think they were trying to tailor it to an engineering exercise as much as they could. It's a little, like Valerie said, it's very detailed.
Mm-hmm.
So some rigor and focus on it.
Kevin's not gonna be able to be there, so maybe he should, you wanna say some
noon as well.
words, Kevin? Are you there?
I'm here. I think, I was able to share some thoughts that I've had on this with Molly and I think a couple of other commissioners yesterday via email. So, I hopefully those will be helpful in the conversation. I think generally speaking, I think when we are briefed by city staff, whether in subcommittee or full commission, we need to have pretty much baseline knowledge about zoning, land use planning, access planning, and we often didn't have that in some of the briefings, and that was I think problematic. I totally agree with city staff that there are ways to streamline the SRP memo And in fact, it should be streamlined. And I had just had some specific thoughts about what's really valuable to have in that memo that I won't repeat that, but I think Polly and others have that via email. And then I'll just say that I do think moving forward, one thing we could do, and I've talked to Michael and Valerie about this, is perhaps have a standing subcommittee for all things Sound Transit related. I think having ad hoc subcommittees work great on most projects, but given how long we'll be working on this project, I think having some continuity at the subcommittee level would be really helpful. And I think we should be really transparent about, with the whole commission, about who's on that subcommittee. Do we solicit interest? How do we make sure people who are really interested in doing that have the opportunity? And then the subcommittee can help report back to the full commission as we go on. So those are just some thoughts. But yeah, I understand from the city's perspective, they're trying to figure this out too. This is new for them, and I'm really hoping that the discussion today is candid and helpful and put in the terms of everybody wanting to be helpful. And I'm really sorry to miss it, but I don't want to give anybody else the flu. So that's why I'm staying home today. Thanks.
So I just have two other thoughts. One is, in this kind of coming year, there's all this work that the city is doing that we got our presentation on last time that we are not involved with. We look at the designs that Sound Transit does at PE 30-60%, right? But we're right now at the point where we're trying to figure out of the station area planning and SDOT's access planning and all those other type of city planning work, how we might be involved with that. Technically, we aren't, but we're going to figure out how we are if we want to be. And so what I'm thinking, that's this green bubble. So the staff review panel in this graphic is the blue bubble in the middle, but there's all this stuff going on. And the more we can follow and be kept along with that, the less we have to figure out at the last minute right before the reviews. So if they can somehow carry us along on this and give us updates on the station area plans, if they can come in and talk to a subcommittee about like these traffic issues, sometimes these kind of more technical things, then when we sit down to look at Sound Transit's plans, at least some, if not all of the commissioners are up to speed already, and we don't have